Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. It's a very busy show today.
Breaking news, President Trump tells Sky News the special relationship is in a sad state and that Keir Starmer has made some tragic mistakes.
Well, that's ahead of the King's visit to the US. The palace have revealed new details of what we can expect, and the President told us he's looking forward to the whole thing.
Diplomatic talks intensify in an attempt to bring an end to the war, but no reprieve in Israel's bombardment of Lebanon, where children are paying the biggest price.
We'll also be talking about moves to tackle medical misogyny. The Health Secretary says the NHS is failing women by gaslighting them.
And will new funding be enough to tackle this mess? We dig into the costs of clearing up illegal waste dumps.
Good morning, thanks for being with us today. So we start with breaking news. Donald Trump has launched a scathing attack on the UK in an interview with Sky News. He described the state of the special relationship as sad because when we asked them for help, they were not there. And he then went on to say he'd given the UK a good trade deal, better than I had to, but it can always be changed. The
President didn't hold back on his assessment of the UK's future. He said Keir Starmer had made a tragic mistake not drilling for oil and gas in the North Sea and described his immigration policies as, quote, insane. He concluded, you can't succeed, not possible, with those policies in place. Well, President Trump was talking to our correspondent Mark Stone in just the last few hours. Quite the phone call. Let's bring in Mark for more. Mark, amazing stuff. Kick it off for us. What was your headline takeaway?
Well, just how scathing he was of the special relationship. In fact, at one point, he didn't appear to even know what I was talking about when I asked him about the special relationship. Which one, he said. His assessment of the British government, of Keir Starmer, of Britain's policies, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to energy, were really quite surprising. I mean, we know he's talked about this sort of stuff before, but I felt his tone was different. He seemed really, well, sad, as you say, was how he described the special relationship. But then, you know, almost in the same sentence, he was saying how much he loved the king, how much he loved the royal family, how much he was looking forward to the state visit, the details of which we had only been revealed by Buckingham Palace an hour before we spoke. We spoke at 6:30 last night, so 7 hours ago or so. It was a 5-minute phone call. He was relaxed. He was happy to talk. I should explain that at the beginning of the call, I told him that I was wanted to record it. He wanted to be quite clear that we wouldn't broadcast the call, but that we could quote from him. So once he said, "Do I have your word on that?" I said yes. He said, "Let's go," and we spoke. And I asked him first about the king. We'll talk about that in a moment. But then pretty quickly, he got on to Keir Starmer and on the special relationship. He said to me, "Well, it's been better, but it's sad, and we gave them a good trade deal, better than I had to, which can always be changed." I think that's very, very interesting. A threat there, hardly veiled, a threat from the president that potentially he could change the trade deal that Britain has done with the United States. Remember, the UK was kind of the envy of the world when it got this preferential trade arrangement with the United States. He is saying to us now that because of the state of the special relationship, because of the fact that he doesn't think that Britain was supportive enough with his war on Iran, and also perhaps because of he doesn't agree with the policies of the UK, it's going in the wrong direction, seemed to be his sentiment. The trade deal could be changed. So that was very interesting. On the broader relationship between the two countries and the policies, he said, "I love your country. I would love to see it succeed. But if you have bad immigration policies and bad energy policies, you have the worst of both. You can't succeed, not possible. So said the president to me. And then, we've heard him talk about North Sea oil and how baffled he is that Britain doesn't drill, baby, drill, as he said on Truth Social just yesterday. He said, I like Starmer, but I think he made a tragic mistake in closing the North Sea oil. You see, your energy prices are the highest in the world. And I think he's made a tragic mistake on immigration. Just to be clear, Britain's energy prices are not the highest in the world. Germany has higher energy prices in Europe. Belgium has higher energy prices in Europe than the UK. So he's not accurate in some of what he's saying here. But really interesting stuff on immigration. I was struck that he used language that we've heard him repeat over and over again about immigration in the United States. He said, your country's being invaded. And I said, by who? I pushed back on him, but by who? And he said, by illegal immigrants from all over the world, including those from prisons, drug dealers, people from mental institutions. Your country is being invaded, he repeated to me. I then said, and it's one of those, obviously a phone call is kind of a bizarre thing to have with the president in this format. And so you don't want to go in hard at the very beginning. So we talked about the king, and I'll come to that in a moment. But when he was talking about our country being invaded by people from mental institutions, drug dealers and all the rest of it, I pushed back and I said, look, isn't this kind of a bit of fake news from you? And actually, is it really your job as American president to be telling Keir Starmer how to run his country? And he said, look, I've been very accurate here. He was saying, I've been right on immigration here. His inference was, I am right on your problems with immigration as well. So really very interesting, but lots on the king as well.
Yeah, you mentioned there having lots on the king. And also, Mark, I think you're absolutely important to reflect as well the pushback that you did give on some of these comments, but still an absolutely striking conversation, particularly with regards to that trade deal. What did Donald Trump say with regards to the king?
Well, I mean, we started with that because, as I say, the conversation, my conversation with him came just an hour after Buckingham Palace revealed the details of this really historic 4-day trip by King Charles and the Queen Camilla. They'll be here in a couple of weeks. They're going to spend the first day here in Washington, where he'll be with the president. Then they'll go to New York. Then they'll go to the countryside in Virginia, to Shenandoah. So it's a really big trip. And the president's excited. I could tell from the tone at the top of at the beginning of the conversation. He said he's a great gentleman, a great friend of mine. He's a fantastic person. And I said to him, look, are you not worried or aware? I'm paraphrasing what I said to him now, but are you kind of worried that perhaps your constant criticism of Keir Starmer, of the Prime Minister, is actually going to be a bit awkward for the king? And he said, no, not at all. I don't. I like Starmer. And then he went on to make the points about the tragic mistakes that he's made. But it was interesting. He completely differentiates the king and the royals and the pomp from the politics. And I said to him at one point, I said, but the king is only coming to Washington because he's been asked to come at the request of the government. And he seemed surprised by that. He didn't seem to be aware that is how it works. I think he thought almost as if the king was coming here because he wanted to come here. So an interesting point there. But it was a very interesting conversation. And as I said, but because it wasn't recorded, and the same was the case last week when I spoke to him mostly about Iran, his tone was different. We're all used to him in public talking, kind of performing, because that's what he likes to do. That's what he does best. But when he knows that's not being recorded, he's kind of not in performative mode. He's a bit more relaxed. In public, he weaves, doesn't he, all over the place, and you kind of lose his thread very often. Certainly in his campaign speeches, often in the Oval Office moments as well. But this call was coherent, completely coherent. You may not agree with what he's saying. You may think that he's wide of the mark on immigration in the UK. You may agree with him on immigration in the UK. Either way, the coherence of the call, of the conversation, of the interview was all there. There was no weaving about. So I thought that was interesting as well. When he's not performing, when the cameras aren't rolling, he's a slightly different guy.
I mean, it's all so fascinating, Mark. And what about, you mentioned Iran. Any insights on his thinking there in terms of the news overnight from J.D. Vance, or the hints at least that talks could begin again?
Yeah, well, only a bit, because you never know how long these calls are going to last. When he's going to, last week I had about a minute and a half before he said he needed to go. This time a bit longer. And we got on to Iran at the very end. He said, I have to go now. And I said, can I ask you one more thing about Iran? Do you think we can have a deal in time for when the king comes? Putting a bit of a sort of timeline on it there. And he said, it's possible, very possible. They're beaten up pretty bad. It's very possible. And then with that, he said he had to go, and the call came to an end. So I didn't get the chance to ask him about his comments about the Pope, for example, or indeed about why he was apparently comparing himself to Jesus just yesterday. You know, so much you could ask him, not enough time when he clearly controls the moment, even on a phone call. The other thing I should say, I was talking to a colleague of ours a couple of days ago, and you know, this is his personal phone. So my colleague said, so what happens at the end of the call? Do you go back through to the White House switchboard, or do you go to Caroline Levitt to sort of wrap up the moment, the call? And you don't, because this is his mobile phone. So you call the phone on spec. He may pick up, he may not. He did last night after just 2 rings. And then we were into it. And then he cuts it off when he's had enough or when he needs to go.
It's extraordinary. It's absolutely fascinating. From everything from, the trade deal to the comments on Iran, but also, I guess, the slightly different version of Donald Trump you got when you had that phone conversation with him. Mark, thanks for staying up for us and relaying it all.
Really fantastic stuff from Mark, and more, of course, to come on Trump 100, of him breaking down all of the details of that call. If you haven't been subscribed to Mark and the US team's Trump 100 podcast, you should do so today. Now, we'll stick with the Middle East, and Lebanon and Israel have held their first direct talks in more than 3 decades.
So the discussions took place in Washington. They were described as productive, but no concrete agreements were made. The Lebanese ambassador also asked for help to try and alleviate the worsening humanitarian crisis in the country after weeks of those deadly airstrikes.
The latest figures from the Health Ministry say more than 2,120 people have been killed since fighting renewed at the start of March. That figure includes 168 children.
Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, has visited a hospital treating some of those children caught up in the conflict. It's a very moving report. I urge you to watch it.
She moves her fingers as she recognises her nurse's voice. But with nearly half her body burned in an Israeli airstrike, any movement at all is painful. Her name is Zainab. She's only 12, and her entire family was killed in the same attack she barely survived. She still doesn't know that her parents and 2 young siblings have all been killed. Her brother was 5. Her baby sister wasn't quite 2 years old. Zainab constantly asks for her mother. Her only 2 visitors are her aunt and uncle, and they can't bring themselves to tell her the brutal truth right now.
All civilian. They bomb. Why? No one knows. They're not fighting. It doesn't have any bomb. It doesn't make any bad thing for anyone. If I was in our house, she's alone. She's alone. We are the only family. This is very, 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 very bad issue. Yeah. I don't know what to say. It's very, very, very bad. Just chill. What she's fighting, she have rockets or bomb, or 2 years, or they are inside the house. They are not fighting inside. They want to do something, go fight inside. Don't maybe this civilian don't attack the civilian. We are civilians.
The sole survivor in just one family affected is still critically ill and not out of danger yet.
Just the most moving report there from Alex Crawford. We are going to be rolling that throughout the programme.
Now, with energy being a significant focus from the Iran war and impacting various countries' economies, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has updated its forecasts for global growth, including the UK, and downgraded UK growth by more than any other nation in the G7.
So today, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves is going to go and meet her opposite number in Washington, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. We can talk to our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, who's here.
Good morning.
So it's bad for everyone, but it's particularly bad for us here in the UK.
Yeah, and just when you think things couldn't get more difficult for the government, the Chancellor, well, for everybody at home, to be perfectly honest, then we get this news yesterday that because of the war in Iran, the UK's economy is going to be the worst hit of all of the world's major economies because of what's going on. Growth has been slashed by the International Monetary Fund. So, as you say, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is meeting with Scott Bessent, her US counterpart, today. I don't know if it might be a bit awkward at the start. I don't know if you've heard Scott Bessent's comments. A small bit of economic pain for a few weeks is worth taking off the incalculable risk of either a nuclear Iran or a nuclear Iran that uses that weapon. Rachel Reeves, it's funny because we have seen over the past week language towards the United States of Donald Trump kind of sharpen from the government here. Rachel Reeves has said she's frustrated and angry that the US went into this war without a clear exit plan, because it's her that's having to clear up the mess here. And while you've got calls as well to increase spending on defence, which are getting louder and louder, it's news that nobody wants to wake up to today, but not least the Chancellor.
It's really interesting, as you say, that we're the worst affected by these forecasts. And a reminder, these are just, economic forecasts albeit by a very credible institution in the IMF. It's worth pointing out that we have this downgrade of 0.5 in their forecast percent growth from 1.3 to 0.8% this year, based on their baseline expectation. But the IMF baseline expectation is that the war is over in 2 weeks and energy markets go back to normal by the middle of the year. And yet, in that rather optimistic scenario, we're quite heavily affected.
Rather optimistic. It feels wildly optimistic,
doesn't it? The most optimistic part about that, I would say, is not just that it might end in 2 weeks. It's that after that, energy markets go back to normal. So you've got a long way to fall for oil prices to get back to where we started the year, to normal. So look, they're the experts and they put these forecasts out. But, global growth, they think's only going to fall from 3.3 to 3.1%, which again, you talk about countries like Australia where there's genuine shortages of fuel in Australia. Consumer confidence just fell more than it's fallen since COVID there. And they're only downgrading growth forecast there from 2.1 to 2%. So, look, let's hope they're right. But even in their optimistic scenario, we're the worst affected.
Yeah, this is a government that's got a lot of challenges on its hands and now set to get even worse with these latest warnings from the IMF.
Yeah, and then we've had Donald Trump saying that he's going to make a trade deal worse as well tomorrow today, which is, just what they need. Lucy, thank you very much.
But more coverage, by the way, from the next couple of days in DC. Rachel Reeves is there for the IMF meeting amongst all of the major finance ministers and making a speech today, and more coverage from Ed Conway and the team over the next couple of days.
Well, let's talk about women's healthcare next, because the Health Secretary is promising to tackle what he's calling medical misogyny within the NHS.
Wes Streeting has set out a range of pledges to stop women being ignored, gaslit and humiliated when seeking answers for health conditions. Let's bring in Phoebe, who's here, with exactly what the Health Secretary is pursuing here.
Well, yeah, as you said, incredibly strong language from the Health Secretary about what needs to be tackled here. So women being gaslit, concerned, neglected, as you said, outdated and misogynistic practices. Something that keeps coming up in this report is endometriosis, which obviously affects a lot of women. It's 1 in 10. It can be incredibly debilitating, and yet it takes almost a decade on average for women to get that diagnosis. But more broadly, other conditions, heart disease, for example. British Heart Foundation says this is thought to be a man's disease, but many women have been cost their health and in some cases their lives due to lack of awareness that it also affects women. In terms of what Labour wants to do to tackle this, Perhaps unsurprisingly, reproductive health is at the very heart of this strategy. So diagnosis and treatment of things like conditions related to menopause, menstruation, pregnancy, improved pain relief for things that most women will experience at some point in their life, like perhaps having the contraceptive coil fitted, better access to abortion care and support for people who have lost their babies. But perhaps one of the most interesting things about the strategy is the focus on provider funding. So, for example, if a woman thinks that a provider is not giving an adequate service, the government is proposing as part of this strategy to trial a system where that feedback means the provider's funding will not be released until improvements have been made.
Phoebe, great stuff. Thanks so much.
We'll be talking an awful lot, of course, about those latest IMF forecasts really showing, I think, the difficulty for everyone, really, given the war in Iran, but particularly, of course, for the United Kingdom. We're also, of course, been talking a lot about defence in recent days as well. So to pick up on a few of these topics, we're joined now, I'm pleased to say, by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray. Great to have you with us this morning. So much to get through with you, I have to say. There's an awful lot of really important stuff to talk about. I just wanted to start on the interview that Mark Stone, our correspondent, has done with Donald Trump overnight. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but he was pretty scathing about the relationship between the US and the UK. He said it's in a sad place. At one point, Mark asked how he would describe the special relationship, and he said, with who? Is it a bit of a problem, our relationship with Donald Trump?
Well, look, I've not seen that interview yet, but the special relationship between the UK and the US is deep, is long-standing, it's bigger than any single occupant of Downing Street or the White House. And we work together with the US day in, day out on sharing intelligence, working together in military operations. You know, this is a long-standing relationship which is in both our interests to protect. Allies disagree sometimes. You know, and we need to be clear that when the Prime Minister takes decisions, that's in our national interest in Britain. And we can see he's taken a decision recently about not getting involved in the attacks on Iran because that's in our national interest. But as allies, we need to respectfully sometimes disagree whilst maintaining the strength of the relationship overall. Yeah,
I can get that, you know, sometimes maybe when he posts a picture of comparing himself to Jesus, you might think, is this a special relationship that we particularly want? But I guess the issue is trading relationships as well. In this interview, Donald Trump said, we gave them a good trade deal, better than I had to, which can always be changed. I mean, that sounds a bit like a threat, doesn't it?
Well, I think one thing we've all got used to recently is that the world changes quite a lot, you know, from day to day and certainly from month to month. But the work that the Prime Minister did with the President when he went to the US, you know, laid some foundations which were really important about our economic trading relationship.
How important is that trading deal between the UK and the US? Like, because we know, obviously, that Donald Trump changes his mind on stuff. And how important is it to try and keep the standards of that trading relationship the same?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the trade deal, the trade arrangements with the US are really important, but it's also really important that we have trade deals with other countries. Sure. So the trade deal with India, also the EU.
But how worried are you? But he's talking about that he could change that trade deal then.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into analysing individual words here and there. We have a long-standing relationship with the US, but as I said, as a country, we also need to look to our other relationships and make sure that they're strong. And one of the things the Chancellor has set out is about, you know, closer working with the EU to bring down barriers to trade there, and that's really in our economic interest as well.
We're used to Donald Trump criticising UK government policy. He made the same comments that he did about the tragic mistake, in his words, of closing the North Sea oil, in his words. He also said the government's immigration policies are insane and your country is being invaded. What would you say to that?
Well, look, it's obviously for the UK government to set policy around immigration, and we inherited a situation where immigration was too high in the UK. It's coming down now, and we're making sure we're doing everything we can, for instance, to close asylum hotels and so on.
Is our country being invaded?
Well, no, I wouldn't use that language myself, but I would say that immigration was too high and it needs to come down, and we also need to make sure we're closing asylum hotels, which we are. The number of asylum hotels is coming down. We know that the number of asylum applications being processed is increasing. We're working with the French about the small boat crossings. You know, there's a lot of work we need to do as a country, but that's work that we're getting on with.
So not being invaded?
Well, it's work that we're getting on with as a country.
OK. Let's talk about defence spending. We have sent £752 million to Ukraine to buy new military equipment. So this is part of the £26.2 billion loan already announced. Is that correct?
I think 2.26. Yeah, so it's basically part of the it's part of the loan. It's sort of underpinned by income from immobilised Russian assets in the EU. But this is a loan to Ukraine to help them to buy military equipment and so on.
And how important is that, do you think, then?
Really important, and the Prime Minister's made clear, and to be fair, this is a cross-party position, certainly between us and the previous government. I don't know about all of the opposition parties anymore, but certainly between us and the previous government, that we stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, because that's really important for our defence as well as for Ukraine's.
Can I talk to you about the pretty stark warning that we've had from Lord Robertson, the guy who wrote the Strategic Defence Review, right? He said, "We are under attack. We are not safe. Britain's national security and safety is in peril." And then he accused what he described as non-military experts in the Treasury of vandalism. I mean, he's kind of talking about you there, isn't he?
Look, I've got a great deal of respect for Lord Robertson, but on this, we just disagree. And if I would point him to the decision, I would point your viewers to the decision that we took as a government, that the Chancellor took, along with the Prime Minister, to have the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. Now, we were elected on a manifesto about setting out a pathway to 2.5% of GDP being spent on defence. Because of decisions the Chancellor's taken, along with the Prime Minister, we're going to hit 2.6% from April next year in a fully funded plan that involves some hard decisions around overseas aid and so on. But the commitment to putting more investment into defence is there to be seen with this biggest sustained increase since the Cold War.
I guess what people like Lord Robertson would say is that all makes sense in a time of peace, normal times, but we are in unprecedented territory here. He's saying that at the moment we're spending 5 times more on welfare than defence. In his words, we cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget. I mean, he's saying that actually the normal rules don't apply. We need to change the state. Is he right?
Well, it's not a zero-sum game when it comes to defence and welfare. You know, as I said, we have the biggest sustained increase
it's not
in
a zero-sum game, but at the same time, it's about choices, isn't it? That's the whole point, right? You know, there's not an unlimited supply of money, as you in the Treasury know more than anyone, so it's about choices. He's saying we're making the wrong choice between welfare and defence.
Well, I gave you an example of a choice that we took as a government there around overseas development aid and cutting that to spend more on our defence. You know, when it comes to welfare, there are choices as well, and we've already started taking choices to reform the welfare system, reforming universal credit, notability, fraud and error.
I'm sorry, it's a bit different talking about overseas aid budget to the welfare budget.
That's all right. I was just giving you an example.
It's not 5 times greater than the defence budget, the aid budget, right?
You said that politics is about choices, and I gave you an example there of a choice that we've taken to increase defence spending, and then I was going on to explain the choices we're taking in welfare to reform universal credit, notability, to reduce fraud and error. These are just the first changes we've made.
Does it need to come down, the welfare bill, then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we need to get more people into work, and as people get into work, that will start bringing the welfare bill down.
Does it need to come down? Is it too high?
At the moment, there are too many people who are stuck on welfare for too long.
Is the welfare bill too high?
We need to make it sustainable. We need to make it fairer for taxpayers, because at the moment, more and more people are going onto welfare. And actually,
but just are you saying it's too high? We're spending too much money on welfare.
I think if you look at what's happening at the moment, the increase in welfare spending, we want to get that under control. We want to make sure it's fairer for taxpayers. And crucially, if I can just make this point, young people, I think getting them into work is an economic and a moral cause, because at the moment there are around 1 million young people who are not in work and not in training. We need to make sure they don't have a life on benefits, because if they go onto benefits at a young age and are economically inactive and outside the jobs market, that can lead to a bad life for them, and obviously it has a bad impact on our economy. And that's what Pat McFadden, as the Secretary of State, is really focused on.
There's just one other thing that I want to ask you, because this is something that a lot of people kind of outside work are asking me, because it feels like something that a lot of people are worried about. Is there a risk that we in the UK might run out of jet fuel?
So there are no issues with jet fuel supply at the moment. And I think the chief executive of Virgin Atlantic spoke out about this yesterday, saying they've got a clear sight on their supplies until at least the end of May. So there are no issues with jet fuel supply at the moment.
But at the minute, end of May, I guess people are, thinking about summer holidays. They're thinking about, is this a live issue? Could there be issues with jet fuel in the year ahead?
Well, look, we're obviously keeping an eye on everything as a government, and we're planning for all eventualities. But people should go about their business as usual. You know, we expect contractors to honour their suppliers to honour their contracts. People should go about their business as usual, and there are no issues with this supply at present.
OK, thank you very much indeed, James Murray, speaking to us there.
We're going to continue the economic discussion after the break and focus in more on those IMF forecasts and what might be discussed in Washington in the next couple of days.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story? I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Welcome back. Well, thanks for being with us this morning. The Chancellor will hold talks in Washington today, where she's attending the International Monetary Fund's spring meeting. It comes, of course, off upgrades and downgrades, more to the point, from the IMF's growth forecast for the year ahead, which saw the UK's growth forecast downgraded from 1.3% to 0.8%. Let's discuss it with Anne Pettifor from the Progressive Economy Forum, who joins me now. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Headline, the IMF growth forecast for the world was 3.3% down to 3.1%.
Yes.
Is that a little bit optimistic?
No, I think yes, it is optimistic in the sense that I think it's if you read the IMF report and the financial stability report, they're really, really worried. They're really, really worried, and so they've put numbers on this, but really these are all speculative numbers. We don't really know what's going to happen because we don't know what's going to happen with this war because it is so erratic and it's been organised in such, in my view, irrational way.
Clearly, we are, as we've been discussing all morning, the economy of the G7 that is most affected. But again, coming back to this idea that global growth will essentially not flinch based on that forecast, a lot of economies in Asia are facing genuine shortages.
Yes.
So do you think there's going to be more knock-on effects of this than, even if the war ends relatively soon,
yes.
than is
No,
currently?
I think there's going to be a really kind of extended period of adjustment as we come back from this crisis. The fact of the matter is, the oil price is much higher than what the futures market is predicting. For example, yesterday, physical traders in oil were paying $133 for a barrel of oil. Those costs are going to flow through the whole of the global economy. And the impact is going to be inflation. We're going to find, incomes falling in real terms. Debt to GDP ratios are out of balance. Bond yields are rising. So when you read the report, going beyond this little number appearing to not indicate very much, actually it's deeply alarming. And so really bringing an end to this war is absolutely vital now.
Clearly, as we mentioned, the UK is more affected than most, in large part because of the fact that we're a net fossil fuel importer.
Yeah.
How important is it to use this wake-up call to try and adjust that over the years ahead? How long does it take to adjust that?
Well, the point is, the problem is the nature of the international financial system. And trading system. We're in a just-in-time world where we actually don't, we don't build up buffer stocks. We don't have stockpiles of, for example, oil or LNG, because we expect it just to arrive on the day we need it. And that model is going to have to change. Now, there are countries like China that have got stocks, and indeed the United States has its reserve, its oil reserve, but we haven't. And we've just been the most open economy in the world, but also the most vulnerable, because in that sense, if you don't have buffer stocks, if you're not prepared for these shocks, then you're in trouble, as we are now.
I mean, we have had one warning recently with 2022 with the Russia-Ukraine invasion.
Yeah.
So is it really unforgivable that we don't have better preparation?
Absolutely. But the point is we have been so committed to this globalised world where there is a single market, for example, for oil, when the United States, which is overflowing in oil and LNG, is paying a global market price for something that has an ample supply at home. So you're going to have real resistance and demands for protectionism from these global markets arise. But we're so committed to them. So in the United States, if you're an oil company and if you're the government and you're collecting revenues, oil at $133 a barrel is great. It's great for you. But if you're a consumer at the pump and your price is going up, you're really going to be badly hurt. And that will have political implications for the world. So I think, we've already seen reactions to this deregulated, liberalised world. We're going to see far more of that protectionism, in my view.
And just finally...
and that's not good for markets.
No, not good either in the short term, probably not in the long term. And just finally, Sophie was talking about this with the government minister just moments ago in terms... Yeah. Another reason why our forecasts are worse than others is our borrowing costs.
Yeah.
What's the solution to that? Is it that we have to get spending down, or are there cleverer solutions than that simple, blunt tool?
You've got me on my hobby horse here. The problem is the Bank of England. The Bank of England is there to support the government when it faces these crises, in much as your bank, should be there to help you in the event of a crisis. But the Bank of England warned in its last statement that it was going to put up interest rates. When the Federal Reserve, for example, said, no, we're going to wait and see what's going to happen. And so we have a real problem with the Bank of England. The Bank of England is very powerful. It's the foundational power of the state. And it is upsetting markets.
But they didn't say that they were going to do that. It's just people reacted to a vote that happened to be unanimous to keep it on hold. They didn't make a statement.
No, but the language was in the statement. The markets read correctly. The markets in the United States didn't have that problem. We had that problem. And so the Bank of England is committed to high real rates, and that's very damaging, both for the government but also for the private sector. So we have a problem with the Bank of England. It's not responsive enough, in my view, to the government's needs, but also to the economy's needs.
It's very, very interesting take that, Anne. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Well, we're talking, of course, about the ongoing consequences and fallout from the war. Next hour, we're going to be joined by John Storpert, who is the Marine Director from the International Chamber of Shipping, so talking about some of those consequences of the US blockade.
Now, Sudan is entering the 4th year of a civil war that's created one of the largest humanitarian crises, with evidence of atrocities, including widespread sexual violence.
So it was sparked by a power struggle between two generals, and then it's grown into this kind of ongoing conflict between the army and paramilitary forces. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, spoke with the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who described Sudan as the greatest catastrophe this century.
Well, we want to bring the focus of the world onto what is happening in Sudan. It is the greatest humanitarian crisis of the 21st century, and we desperately need a ceasefire. We desperately need support for those who are facing the most unimaginable atrocities and the most unimaginable experiences as a result of the conflict, still 3 years on.
You've described the war in Sudan as the worst humanitarian crisis in the 21st century. The UN has described Gaza as the worst humanitarian crisis. Is there a reason that you've said that?
So I think if you look at the number of people who have been killed, the scale of the sexual violence being used, and the number of people facing famine, you currently have, I think, millions of people in Sudan who continue to be at risk of famine, equivalent really to the scale of the population in London. And so that scale of the famine, that scale of the number of people being killed, I think does need more focus. But look, I'm also deeply concerned about what is continuing to happen in Gaza. And we have called that the ceasefire steps that took place in the autumn was really important, but we need to see much more progress. And there's a risk at the moment that we've seen humanitarian aid actually being reduced to Gaza.
Well, we could talk now to the Chief Executive of United Against Malnutrition and Hunger, Lord Oates, who's with us now. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Great to have you on the programme. It is, in some ways, do you think, at risk of becoming a forgotten war?
It is very much a forgotten war, and the Foreign Secretary said out there that the scale of the humanitarian crisis is absolutely extraordinary. We have 150,000 people dead, we have 14 million people who are displaced, we have 30 million people who are hungry or starving, and we have levels of sexual violence against women and girls which is on an industrial scale. So it is impossible to overstate the suffering that is going on.
When you say, and I know it's a difficult thing to talk about for all the reasons, sexual violence on an industrial scale, what is that? What does that mean?
Well, it means that women and girls who are being displaced from places in Darfur, like El Fasher, etc., people are being raped, they are being sexually assaulted on the roads. Sexual violence has been used, as it is sadly in so many conflict situations, as a method of warfare. Alongside that, we have 1 in 3 children in the country are acutely malnourished. That means children who are starved to the point where their bodies are consuming their own fat and muscle. So it really is a catastrophic situation, and the international community needs to get a grip on it.
I'm sure you've, over this 3-year period, dwelt on this and thought of it yourself. Why do you think it is forgotten, and what can you do to correct that?
Well, I think, I mean, it's great that organisations like yours are discussing this matter, but if you look at some of our mainstream newspapers, they're not taking it up at all. I mean, to be fair to the media, there is so much going on elsewhere as well, and I think that's a real problem. So it's incumbent on all of us to keep raising this issue. But I think we need to also get across to people why it matters, not just only because it's an absolute moral outrage that this level of suffering is being imposed on people, but also because it has an impact on our own security, on UK and European security. And Mo Ibrahim, writing earlier this week, has explained how if we have a total collapse of Sudan, we will have an arc of instability from the Atlantic through the Sahel to the Red Sea. That is a breeding ground for extremism and terrorism, and that will end up on our shores. So it matters both for the moral reasons, and that should be our compelling thought, but it matters also for our own security.
I mean, as we said in the intro, you're the CEO of United Against malnutrition and hunger. I'm sure you know global food supplies better than most. We talked about how hard it is for you to get the attention on this war. How hard is it going to be going forward, given the Iran war? Is that going to make global food supplies even more scarce? To what degree?
Yeah, well, the World Food Programme has estimated that if the war goes on to June and the oil price remains above $100 a barrel, that there will be an extra 45 million people suffering severe hunger in the world. And obviously it has impacts through, we know that fertiliser is stuck in behind the straits. We know that the oil price affects fertiliser costs. We know that's all driving up in the longer term food costs. But also supplies of things like ready-to-use therapeutic foods, which are these emergency kind of peanut paste to save the lives of children and adults with acute malnutrition. They are being blocked in warehouses, some of that in warehouses in Dubai, etc. We urgently need to get those supplies out, and we need to find the funding also to support efforts like the World Food Programme, because only 16% of the humanitarian need in Sudan is funded at the moment.
I mean, honestly, the statistics that you talk about are just nuts when it comes to the war here. You know, it's estimated that 25 million people, so half the population, going hungry or starving. I mean, you can't really hold these numbers in your head. There obviously needs to be some kind of diplomatic resolution, as with all wars, right? How has this got to the place that it has in Sudan? And is there any hope of peace?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the long-term solution has to be to end the war. I mean, ideally, the short-term solution, but the real solution is to end the war. There needs to be much more pressure on the parties that are supporting the warring factions in Sudan. Whether it's the UAE, Saudi, Egypt, etc., there needs to be more pressure to prevent the export of gold and other products which are fueling the war. But in the meantime, we have to do all we can to alleviate the humanitarian suffering. I'm very pleased to see that the Foreign Secretary is announcing today that they're putting more money into the emergency response rooms. This is Sudanese community groups which are doing so much work to alleviate the suffering.
I was just talking to James Murray, the Treasury Minister there, who was talking about how it was the right decision to move aid funding to defence funding. Is that a problem?
It's a big problem, and one, because we obviously, we have cut our aid budget more steeply even than the Trump administration, which is not widely recognised. And that means we've got less resources for Sudan. But what it also means is where the UK used to play a role in the international community, galvanising action from other countries as well, we've lost that moral leadership. And that has a direct impact in terms of people's lives. So we really need to get back there to that. We need to see defence and development not as separate things, but together. Because if we cut back on aid, we spend more on defence. And you talk to any former chief of the defence staff, they'll tell you the same.
OK, good to have you on.
Lord Oates, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you. We're going to have a quick look at the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
The next few days will bring widespread showers or more general rain, but it will turn warmer. Expect a very mild and mostly grey start with some rain around. Western parts of Britain will see prolonged heavy rain moving in this morning, while central and eastern areas will see just a little rain in places. In fact, some bright spells will develop there. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see sunshine and showers once persistent early rain clears to the east. It'll be warmer overall, but blustery.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
So we just wanted to let you know about something that's coming up later in the programme. We're pretty excited, should be said, I think, about the World Cup starting in 2 months, and we're going to be joined by the former Lioness, Jill Scott. She's in Texas for us and at the stadium where England are going to be.
Another moment of football optimism from me.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and stop Wilf ruining our chances by jinxing it. That's my role in all this.
Right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about illegal dumping of waste in Oxfordshire.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Oof. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over. Full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. James Matthews from Sky News. Why was Ghislaine Maxwell invited to your daughter Chelsea Clinton's wedding? Maria, did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal.
Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Did you stay at the apartment of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
Mr. Hexter, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? James Matthews from Sky News, Mr. Mamdani.
I have to be honest, when you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited. Could you repeat the question one more time?
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented. Been quite some day.
We start with breaking news.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Welcome back. Turning our attention to the issue of waste crime now, something we've reported a lot on here at Sky News, because a clean-up operation has now begun at an illegal waste site near the River Cherwell in Oxfordshire. The 150-metre long trail of rubbish was declared a critical incident by the Environment Agency last November.
So we've got 30 lorry loads of rubbish being removed every day, which gives you a bit of a sense of the scale of the problem. It's expected to cost at least £7 million to get rid of it all. Our climate reporter Victoria Seabrook had a look.
20,000 tonnes of filthy, rotting rubbish. The clean-up has just started. It will take 15 lorries a day until the end of summer and cost the taxpayer £8 million.
It's only when you come to a site like this that you realise quite how disgusting it is. They are huge, they give off the smell of egg, and here they've got one of these machines to try and mask the smell.
There are hundreds of these sites around the country, and the government says it has a national solution, pledging help for landowners to clean up and extra powers and cash for the Environment Agency.
The new funding that you've promised is going to be £15 million a year, but this site alone is going to cost £8 million to clean up, and overall across the country it's costing us £1 billion every year. So this new funding, it's not going to touch the sides, is it?
But we've got to, as the Environment Secretary, I stick by the principle that the polluter should pay. We've got 4 arrests already been made here. The idea is that we reclaim the costs from the criminals, and that's why we've toughened up the penalties.
But the taxpayer is paying for this, £8 million.
But we will recover as much of the cost of that as we possibly can.
Waste crime is seen as the new drug dealing. It's a cash cow for criminal gangs who charge people to take away their waste and then instead of paying to put it in a landfill, dump it illegally. It's seen as low risk and high reward because so far the penalties have been few and far between. We have the police, we have a regulator, and yet this is a booming criminal industry.
That's why we have already increased the capacity of the Environment Agency when it comes to drones, to see from the air what's going on, to try and stop this kind of criminality in its tracks before it gets to this extent.
Because sites like this keep growing despite residents sounding the alarm, and over their complaints seem to fall through the cracks.
Residents get put on a merry-go-round of reporting to different agencies. It's taxpayers who are on the hook for all of this, and they'll want the criminals to be held to account more fully.
Eventually, these fields should turn green again. The Environment Agency says its new technology will help it get ahead of criminal gangs. But with an average of 10 new sites appearing every week, they have a long way to go. Victoria Seabrook, Sky News.
It really is unbelievable to see, isn't it? And by the way, well done, Victoria. It must have stunk.
Oh, it is genuinely unbelievable. And actually, I don't think I really kind of clocked. Maybe that's my issue. But like, if you pay someone 50 quid or whatever to take away a mattress, this is where it's ending up.
There. Illegal. I know. Well, look. I mean, the idea of make polluter pay, great. What did you say? 4 arrests.
4 arrests.
Victoria said it costs 8 million to clean up. You're going to get 2 million off each of them.
Yeah.
Unlikely. So it's probably going to have to be punish the people that pay to pay these people as well.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Or else you're just not going to catch them.
And it's going around across the UK as well. I know there's been a bit of criticism for focusing on, places in the south, places like Oxford, but it is a big issue in some northern towns as well. If it is in your area, let us know as well. Mornings at sky.uk.
We're out of time. We'll be back after this.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning. It is 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilfred, very good morning from me as well. A busy show ahead.
Breaking news. President Trump talks to Sky News, telling us the special relationship is in a sad state. And Keir Starmer has made some tragic mistakes.
That's ahead of the King's visit to the US. The palace have revealed new details of what we can expect. The president told us he's looking forward to the entire trip.
Diplomatic talks intensified to try and bring an end to the war, but there's no reprieve in Israel's bombardment of Lebanon, where children are paying the biggest price.
Also today, we'll be talking about moves to tackle medical misogyny. The Health Secretary says the NHS is failing women by gaslighting them.
And will enough new funding come along to tackle this mess? We are digging into the costs of clearing up illegal waste dumps.
A very good morning. Welcome to the programme. We start with breaking news. President Trump has launched a scathing attack on the UK in an interview with Mark Stone. He described the state of the special relationship as sad because when we asked them for the help, they were not there, and went on to say he'd given the UK a good trade deal, but better than I had to, and it can always be changed, he said.
So the president also didn't hold back on his assessments of the UK's future. He said Keir Starmer had made, in his words, a tragic mistake not drilling for new oil and gas in the North Sea, and also described his immigration policies as, quote, insane. He said, you can't succeed, not possible. While Donald Trump was talking to our correspondent Mark Stone in the last few hours, it was quite the phone call. Let's bring in Mark to tell us more. So many news lines here, Mark. I think perhaps the most telling moment was when you asked him what he thought of the special relationship, and he said, which one?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, I think he is aware of the phrase special relationship. In fact, I know he is because he's talked about it before. But in the moment, he didn't appear to know what I was referring to when I asked about the state, the health of the special relationship. So I said the one with the UK, and that was the first of many quotes that we can bring you. He said to me, "Well, it's been better." But it's sad. We gave them a good trade deal, better than I had to, which can always be changed. And I think that's really interesting. He is suggesting there that because he's not happy with Starmer, because he's not happy with British policies on immigration, on energy, and a lot as well, because he's not happy about Britain not supporting him in his war in Iran, Keir Starmer taking a stand on that, believing it was illegal, not wanting to get involved. Because of all that, he seems to be suggesting in the conversation with me that the trade deal can be changed, a preferential trade deal that British diplomats hammered out for many weeks. And it was the envy of many countries of the world, and still is, by the way. But this apparently could be changed. So I think that was very interesting. I asked him more broadly about his views of Britain, because he seems to be continually having a pop at Keir Starmer at the moment. And he said, I love your country and I would love to see it succeed. But you have bad immigration policies and bad energy policies and you have the worst of both. You can't succeed, he said. Not possible. So really scathing stuff. I think the language seemed to me, I mean, we know there it is. We know he's said that, this sort of thing before, but I felt the tone of it and the fact he kept going back to it in this 5-minute conversation was really interesting. And then talking about Keir Starmer specifically, he said, I like Starmer, but I think he's made a tragic mistake in closing the North Sea oil. You see, your energy prices are the highest in the world, and I think he's making a tragic mistake on immigration. Those two issues, energy and immigration, he went back to a few times. He was really critical of British policy on those two issues, and seemed to suggest to me that they should change. And I it's kind of a strange situation, these phone interviews, because You don't quite know how long he's going to talk for. At what point he might be like, why am I doing this, and just hang up. So I went in kind of soft. We talked about the king first, and then got a bit, pushed back at him. And I pushed back on that. Why is it your job, Mr. President? I'm paraphrasing what I said, but, why is it your job as American president to sort of criticise Keir Starmer's running of Britain? That's up to the British Prime Minister. And he said, well, it's not my job, but, everyone tells me that Britain is not doing very well. And so I feel sad about that, was I'm paraphrasing, but that is what he said. But there was a lot of positive stuff about the king. He really differentiates, the pomp and the royalty from the politics.
Well, I'm sure that therefore led to quite a balance across the phone call. What were some of the things he said ahead of the state visit?
Well, the call came, we had the call at 6:30 last night. So what was it, like 7-8 hours ago now? And it came just an hour after Buckingham Palace had announced the details of this 4-day state visit that's happening in 2 weeks' time. King Charles, Queen Camilla, they're going to be in Washington, they're going to be in New York, they're going to be in the countryside in Virginia, lots with President Trump as well. He is a great gentleman, so said the president to me, a friend of mine, a fantastic person. He also had a few words about the late Queen as well. Really, really effusive. And I could tell from his tone that he was kind of excited about this trip. Which bit are you looking forward to the most? I said, all of it, he said, in a very kind of Trumpian way, every single part of it. So I thought that was interesting. And then I said to him, look, are you worried that your criticism of Starmer, which is pretty much daily right now, and in this phone call, is that going to undermine or make it awkward for the king? And he said, no, not at all. They're kind of separate things. And then, interestingly, I said, but the king's only coming because Downing Street, the Prime Minister, has asked him to come. He is the soft power that might smooth over the special relationship. And he didn't recognise that at all. He sort of didn't realise that the king is only coming at the invitation or the request of Downing Street. So I thought that was quite interesting.
And Mark, finally, you managed to touch as well, didn't you, on Iran? What did he say there?
Yeah, I mean, again, as I said, these calls, you don't know how long they're going to last. And by the way, someone was saying to me a couple of days ago after the call we had last week, what happens at the end of it? Do you get through to the switchboard or to the White House switchboard, or to Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, because they kind of close it off and debrief? No, because it's literally his cell phone. He has, he takes people's calls now. There's a number of us that have got his number, one of his numbers, and he just takes the call. So you don't quite know how long this is going to last, what mood he's in, whether he'll even answer. So we did the royal stuff, we did the Starmer stuff, and then clearly I wanted to ask him about Lebanon, about Iran as well. More prickly issues. On Iran, very briefly, he said, I've got to go now. And I said, well, let me just ask you one more thing about Iran. And he said, I said, do you think you'll have a deal by the time the king comes? It's possible, he said, very possible. They're beaten up pretty bad. It's very possible. I should explain, too, that at the beginning of the call, I said we were going to record it. And he said, OK, I can't find which bit of it that was. But then he said, look, I need your word that you're not going to broadcast it. You can quote me, but don't broadcast it. And obviously we said that's fine. And I think as a result of that, you get a slightly different president. He's less combative. He's less performative. He was kind of quite low energy, actually. He sounded quite tired. But it was a sort of different President Trump from the one that we see daily, hourly, and are used to.
Mark, fantastic stuff. So much in it, and there is more on the Trump 100 podcast. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to do so. Mark and the team in the US's podcast, and of course on the Sky News website as well.
And of course, Mark was speaking to the president about those talks between the US and Iran. We're expecting more in the coming days. But let's stay with the war, because Lebanon and Israel have also held their first direct talks in more than 3 decades.
Although the discussions, which took place in Washington, were described as productive, no concrete agreements were made. The Lebanese ambassador asked for help to alleviate the country's worsening humanitarian crisis after weeks of deadly strikes.
The figures are pretty stark, I have to say. The Health Ministry says more than 2,120 people have been killed since the fighting started up again at the beginning of March, and that includes 168 children.
Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, has visited a hospital treating severely wounded children caught up in the conflict.
She moves her fingers as she recognises her nurse's voice. But with nearly half her body burned in an Israeli airstrike, any movement at all is painful. Her name is Zainab. She's only 12, and her entire family was killed in the same attack she barely survived. She still doesn't know that her parents and 2 young siblings have all been killed. Her brother was 5. Her baby sister wasn't quite 2 years old. Zainab constantly asks for her mother. Her only 2 visitors are her aunt and uncle, and they can't bring themselves to tell her the brutal truth right now.
All civilian. They come to why? No one knows. They're not fighting. He doesn't have any bomb. He doesn't make any bad thing for anyone. If I was in our house, she's alone. She's alone. We are the only family. This is very bad issue. Yeah. I don't know what to say. It's very bad. Just chill. What she's fighting, she have rockets or bomb, or 2 years, or they are inside the house. They are not fighting inside. They want to do something, go fight inside. Don't make this civilian attack. Don't attack the civilian. We are civilians.
The sole survivor in just one family affected is still critically ill and not out of danger yet.
More to come as well from Alex's reporting later in the show, and the full report is on the Sky News website.
We'll be continuing, of course, to talk about the humanitarian situation, but also the economic situation as well. The energy shock from the Iran war, of course, being felt globally, leading economists to reduce forecasts for growth, but particularly in the UK, more than any other G7 nation. Well, today, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will meet with her opposite number in Washington, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Our political correspondent, Lucy McDade, is here with a preview of what we can expect from these next couple of days of meetings she's got in Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes at quite a time, and I imagine it will be a bit of a frosty meeting between her and her US counterpart, who this week just said that a small bit of economic pain is worth it for long-term global security. And let's be honest, you know, the government has maintained from the beginning of this conflict it's not involved in this war. And Rachel Reeves has pretty much gone public with that, saying that she's angry, frustrated at what she called this folly of US actions in the Middle East, saying that they went into this without a plan, and hence it is having an impact on people here. And now she's walking into this meeting, this face-to-face meeting, with this latest warning that the UK's economy is going to be the hardest hit out of the world's major economies. It's frankly a challenge that she doesn't need right now. Yeah, and again, we're the worst affected, but a lot of these forecasts, as one of our guests earlier was saying as well, they seem kind of optimistic as well. I mean, based on the fact that the forecast the IMF put out yesterday, where we lose 0.5% of growth from their prior forecast, 1.3 down to 0.8, is based on the war ending in 2 weeks and energy prices going back to normal by the summer, which is certainly not confirmed yet, whether it's and I think it's becoming clear from warnings from economic experts, etc., that the long-term damage of this is going to be really felt. What isn't helpful for the government is they are facing financial challenges on multiple fronts. So these calls this week to massively increase defence spending, and it's not like the warnings are coming from voices they can ignore. They are loud and they are stark. And I thought what was really interesting is the response that James Murray, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, gave you earlier this morning, Sophie. Should we just listen to it?
Look, I've got a great deal of respect for Lord Robertson. But on this, we just disagree. And if I would point him to the decision, I would point your viewers to the decision that we took as a government, that the Chancellor took, along with the Prime Minister, to have the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War.
Lucy, I thought it was quite interesting that they decided to put James Murray up on the round this morning, talking about the Ukraine investment, defence, and also, of course, because Lord Robertson's criticised non-military people in the Treasury. I mean, it felt like they almost wanted to take him on a bit.
Yeah, and also I think because we are talking so much about this conflict in Iran, I feel like we haven't spoken about UK domestic politics as much for a long time. And I think that's interesting about Ukraine, like you say, because this is also a government that is not doing so well in the polls, right? So you have these calls to increase defence spending. You've got the announcement today about more money going to Ukraine. And I do think it's interesting to see how this will play out with voters. What's also challenging is that you've got criticism about how much the government spends on welfare. So Rachel Reeves is in Washington today with calls to increase defence spending, calls to cut welfare, criticism from the US. Essentially, she's going to come home with some serious calculations to make that aren't going to be easy with her own MPs.
Yeah, very difficult position. I just also want to, there's a bit with, I guess, exaggeration or spin with James Murray. This phrase that's the biggest sustained increase since the Cold War is when you're talking about it in pounds, not accounting for inflation since 1989 when the Cold War ends. So there is also this spin and exaggeration that I think then people aren't feeling. I mean, defence isn't something people really feel, let's hope, because hopefully it isn't relevant. But that's when they can continue to say, oh, we're doing this, this and that. And I'm not sure people at home really feel that the same way.
Yeah, and even with that, you've got an ex-NATO Secretary-General saying that it is simply not enough and UK security is in peril. So they're going to have to answer those questions and come out with their spending plans.
Lucy, great stuff. Thank you.
Now, 2 driving schools in the UK have been ordered to refund 80,000 customers, 80,000, after they were found guilty of a sales tactic known as drip pricing. Now, I don't actually know what that was, but it's when you advertise a price for something and then you add in a load of costs later on the line, that's right?
I think so, yeah. But AA and BSM driving schools will need to stump up £4.2 million after falling foul in the eyes of the competition watchdog.
We got a response from the AA driving school. Although the £3 booking fee was made clear to customers prior to their purchase, we acknowledge it should have also been displayed at the start of the online booking journey. Having listened to the regulator, we made immediate changes to our website to make the £3 booking fee more prominent. We're now refunding all relevant customers. While we're disappointed with the outcome of the investigation, we've fully cooperated with the CMA throughout. We'd emphasise protecting consumer rights has been central to our business for more than 120 years. Let's talk about women's healthcare now. The Health Secretary promising to tackle what he's calling medical misogyny in the NHS. Wes Streeting has set out a range of pledges to stop women being ignored, gaslit and humiliated when seeking answers for health conditions. Let's bring in Phoebe, who's got more details of what's being discussed there.
Well, some incredibly strong language, as you said, from the Health Secretary about what is really happening in women's health. Women being gaslit, concerns, neglected, outdated and misogynistic practices. Endometriosis is something that does come up quite a lot in this strategy. It affects 1 in 10 women, incredibly debilitating. And yet it takes almost a decade on average for women to get diagnosed. And reproductive health really is at the heart of this strategy for Labour. They want to tackle diagnosis and treatment for conditions around, menopause, menstruation, pregnancy, improve pain relief for things that women have to go through on a regular basis, like having contraceptive coils fitted, supporting parents who lose their babies, providing better care for women who need abortions, for example. But perhaps the most interesting thing about the strategy is the way in which women's feedback is going to be put sort of at the centre of how medical providers are paid. So a trial is going to be part of this strategy where if a provider is not giving adequate care to women and women's flag up concerns, their funding will not be released by the government until they have made those improvements. So an extraordinary approach.
It's interesting, isn't it? So, thinking about some of these things like periods, right, which is a lot of it is tied into endometriosis. We don't talk enough about what is a normal period or what isn't a normal period. When should you ask for help? Menopause is another one I feel that it's only really in the last 5 years, it feels to me, that we're actually talking about what is the menopause, what is normal, what is not normal, when do you need to go to your doctor about this? And I guess there is that slight hope that with a more open society, like talking these things, saying period on TV, it kind of hopefully will make a bit of a difference as well.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, awareness is at the heart of the strategy. They want young people to be educated in what is and isn't normal and what they should be flagging up and not feeling ashamed about talking openly and getting that help. And part of the strategy also is to get kind of local diagnostic centres available to women so that they have that single point of contact where they can just go and know that they will be safe and heard.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Phoebe.
Now, nearly a decade ago, Zelda Perkins became the first woman to break a non-disclosure agreement to speak out against abuse by Harvey Weinstein. The former assistant to the disgraced film producer has successfully campaigned for reforms in the UK to stop employers misusing NDAs and is now working to ensure the legislation is impossible to sidestep.
Well, Zelda Perkins joins us now. It's great to have you. I remember when we last spoke, and very forceful and moving, and you've done some incredible work, in this area. Where are we at right now? What do you make of what the government's up to?
Well, we're actually at the most nerve-wracking part. And obviously, as a campaigner, this is all stuff that I've learnt. But basically, the primary legislation has gone through. So the government has made huge strides and said that no clause in an agreement can stop an employee speaking up about harassment or discrimination that they've witnessed or suffered, or how their employee has responded. However, the real crux of the matter is that within that legislation, there is going to be room for victims to ask for confidentiality if they want it. Now, this is where things get really tricky, because what could happen at this point is if people don't engage now with the consultation, the public consultation which the government have launched today, there is a possibility that we will end up rubber stamping the ability for employers to still coerce employees into signing an NDA by saying, oh, well, you've asked to have an NDA. So it's really important that people who've had experience of being silenced or coerced at work really speak up now. This is the moment where people who have been silenced can speak up, can engage directly with the government and shape the law. And there's a possibility here to make the law globally leading, or there's a possibility for the law to fall short and undermine what it's trying to do. Because there's obviously a lot of people with skin in the game, big employers, corporates, lawyers, who will respond to this consultation saying that, employers still need the right to ask for confidentiality.
How long is the consultation? I mean, are you ultimately very optimistic and supportive of the government for how far this has gotten?
Yes.
All the necessary steps have been taken, there's just a few more to take.
So the consultation will be 12 weeks. Again, I won't ever believe it's done till it's actually, the policy's been written and it has been implemented. And the government has to listen to what happens in the consultation. But the government have been incredibly collaborative with myself and other people, working in this area, and I really believe that they are trying to do the right thing. And this is going to be the government showing that they listen to the people that matter and they bring some equality into bargaining and equality and help for victims, and don't continue to listen to the people in power to keep that status quo. The other thing that's really important that they're consulting on is if this should be broadened to cover self-employed and freelance workers. That's also hugely important. That's a huge percentage of the British workforce who currently don't have any protections. So if you're an actor, and obviously I come from the creative industries, if you're an actor or a crew member, you tend to be freelance. So you wouldn't be protected by this law unless the government broadened this to freelance and self-employed workers.
That does feel like quite big.
That's huge. So again, it's another reason for people to really engage with this consultation. And I think, to me, it's really exciting, having gone on this journey as a campaigner, to see that as a member of the public, you do have power to shape the law, but you have to engage. And this is a moment where you can engage and you can get the rights that you need heard by the government.
I mean, you obviously, and talk about this as much or as little as you want, but you've had experience of people trying to silence you, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I was silenced by an incredibly egregious non-disclosure agreement back in 2017, when not in 2017, God, in 20 years ago, I broke it in 2017. Yes, when I tried to report the fact that Harvey Weinstein had sexually assaulted my assistant. It was less Harvey's behaviour, more the way that the law dealt with that. That was the problem for me, because currently the system enables those in power to behave how they choose. And the victims are the ones who are silenced, who lose their jobs, who can't then get new jobs because they can't speak about what's happened to them. And this actually has a really big effect on the economy, because you're usually losing people who are the people who want to speak up and who want to make the environment better.
Or people who want to help the victims.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm really just interested to pick up on what you said on freelance, because are people bound by silence automatically? Or surely you've had to have signed something that included a clause you weren't aware of in order to be bound by that?
Yes, you have to have signed something that says that you can't speak about what's happened. A lot of unscrupulous employers will have a kind of pre-dispute confidentiality clause within a contract, particularly those who work in media. I suggest you look at your contracts very carefully.
But presumably there is confidentiality in ours, like we can't disclose, stuff we get emailed about.
That's totally legitimate and fair enough. This is only dealing with misconduct and harm, so discrimination or harassment, which is not what confidentiality is for. It's also not... This isn't meant to stop people from settling. There are always going to be disputes at work, and we want victims to have the ability to settle, which is their right. But what shouldn't happen is that payment, which is a legitimate payment, is not linked to them not speaking, which means that employers and lawyers use that as a form of blackmail. They say you'll get a bigger settlement if you don't speak about it. If we break that link, it will make settlement faster, and it'll mean that people will... It's not going to make a difference to the amount of payment they get, actually, and we've seen that from the states in the US, because there are over 27 states that have legislated against the use of NDAs, and that's actually helped settlements move faster and actually rise by about 10%.
Zelda, thanks so much. Really interesting.
Yeah, always good to have you on. Thank you.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about that attempted blockade of the Strait of Hormuz with an expert on shipping from Rusi.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Welcome back. Well, how global power dynamics and diplomacy are playing out in the war in Iran is the focus of political and military leaders across the world. And our next guest helps to break down how all of those interactions are changing.
Let's try and find out a bit more, shall we? Dr. Jack Watling is a senior research fellow for land warfare at the Royal United Services Institute. He joins us now. Great to have you on. Very big picture. So, how would you sort of describe your, I guess, main kind of philosophy and your thrust of it?
Well, in the book, I wrote it because I observed a pattern whereby we kept predicting, and actually the crises we were predicting were quite predictable, and yet when they arose, whether it be the closure of the Straits of Hormuz or other crises, we were surprised and we ran into crisis and we suddenly had to rip up all of our plans and change everything. And so the question I was essentially trying to address was, well, why is it that if this was predictable, we managed it as a crisis rather than having a playbook that we could implement from the get-go?
Is that just because our politicians aren't up to it?
No, I think it's that over the last 20 years, we've largely been dealing with what I would call small problems. Not small because the impact is small, but small because the scale of the actual thing is small, like a terrorist attack. And so we've structured government to react very quickly and to move to deal with these unpredictable things. But now we're dealing with state actors who are powerful. The scale at which they act, whether it be invading Ukraine by Russia, is significant. And so you have to take decisions much earlier. And that's, our system is not geared to do that.
How impressive has Ukraine's innovation, nimbleness, response been?
Well, on the one hand, very, very impressive. And there is a mobilization of the whole society to protect Ukraine, which has enabled them to be very innovative. But we forget that Ukraine was invaded in 2014. They'd been at war for 8 years, right? And so the society actually had a lot of muscle memory, as it were, in dealing with this kind of situation that had been built up over a sustained period.
What do you think of our response in the last 6 weeks or 7 weeks to the Iran war?
Fairly poor. This was something that we didn't necessarily know the day, but we knew this was an entirely plausible thing that could happen probably for the last 6 months. It's been the subject of conversation. And if we had started preparing then, we could have positioned ourselves much better. We could have started stockpiling. We could have started to engage with our Gulf allies about how they protect their airspace from drones. I was asked to go out to Kuwait in the autumn to engage with them on precisely that issue. So this was a conversation that the government didn't really move early enough to address.
Yeah, and also with the Strait of Hormuz as well, we've had leaders coming out saying that they were surprised by it. I remember, we had Sean Bell in the studio a while ago, and he was saying that in every bit of game planning, in every kind of mock war, if you like, involving Iran, that was always happened.
Step one, yeah. Probably the most war-gamed event in military.
So why did it take us by surprise?
Well, I don't think the reaction took us by surprise, but I think it's this issue of the decisions being forced on policymakers very late, and therefore the things you need to be able to respond are not in place, which means that you inherently have really bad options, right? It's a bit like if the car in front of you slows down and you decide to brake late, it's going to be a really sharp stop, right?
In terms of what we should be doing going forward, obviously there's a big debate about how much defence spending should be. Is there need to be a complete rethink on what we spend that on, and are you optimistic or pessimistic that we'll spend the money efficiently?
Well, there's two issues there, right? There's what forces do we need, and that's about the commitment that we make to our allies. Now, we've been increasing our commitment to NATO, which would suggest that we need to increase spending to meet that commitment. But at the same time, we have been delaying making decisions to invest in defence while burning out all of the legacy older systems that we had, such that the gap between our stated policy and the resources we put in is expanding. And that means that you have to accelerate the money going into defence. The bill gets bigger over time. And so the longer you delay the decision, the harder it is to find the money.
But it's also, like Wilf says, like what we're spending money on as well. It feels to me like we're often spending money on fighting the last war rather than the next war, like tanks that, by the way, happen to cause issues with our armed forces hearing, for example, rather than, the technology that you see being used in Ukraine at the minute?
Well, on the one hand, those tanks are, they have huge amounts of digital architectures and sensing in them, which is quite transformative. And so that would have been a very forward-looking investment if they'd been brought into service on the original timeline. But in order
when were they meant to come in?
Well, so this project, the agreement to actually deliver them was in 2014, right? But we've essentially slow-rolled the
It's 10 years ago. I mean, it does feel like it's a different world then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. But it's a good example of where the Ministry of Defence was aware that there could be a major conflict in the future and you would need equipment that was appropriate for that. But the spending and the delivery was delayed, and as a result, the bill goes up.
Jack, thanks so much for joining us. A reminder, Jack's book, Statecraft, The New Rules of Power in a Divided World, as well, is out now. Jack Walling, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the US claims it's completely halted economic trade with its blockade of shipping traffic bound for Iranian ports, but reports suggest more than 20 commercial ships have passed through the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours. Let's talk about that specifically. Marine Director of International Chamber of Shipping, John Storpert, joins us. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
What is your very short-term assessment of flow of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz last couple of days?
The trend has has followed the same trend as since the start of this conflict. There is very, very little that is going through. As you say, there have been reports of some local traffic, Iranian traffic, getting through the Strait, but we're not clear as to exactly what the terms of that are. And for the time being, I think you can confidently predict that shipping will stay in the Gulf until we get greater certainty as to the threat.
What volume of ships are stuck there? I mean, obviously they're not getting out, and that affects oil prices and the rest. What about actually stuck there in a sort of dangerous way, that people on board for 6 weeks plus?
So there's about 1,000 ocean-going ships, what we call SOLAS vessels. That equates to around 20,000 seafarers, but there's other tonnage that is currently stuck in the Gulf. That would be coastal tonnage, but also offshore vessels. And so there's a lot of people on board these ships who've essentially been under house arrest for 6 weeks through no fault of their own. We've seen casualties as a consequence of these attacks. And it's a very, very stressful situation. And our biggest concern at the moment is the welfare, particularly the psychological welfare of those seafarers.
Are they short supplies?
No, supply doesn't seem to have been interrupted as badly as we expected it to. We had concerns about potable water, about food, about fuel to keep the ships running. That seems to have been overcome, and we have spoken with the Gulf states, and the International Maritime Organization is also very focused on that. What has happened is the price of stores has gone up.
Assume that this weekend there's some kind of ceasefire deal, a more long-standing ceasefire deal. How quickly does global supplies and global trade get back to normal? Is it quite a sort of easy thing to fire up again, or does it have a lag effect?
I think there will be a lag effect. I think the million-dollar question is whether the straits would be open. We've heard that the straits are mined. That would have an impact on how many ships we could get out each day, bearing in mind that normal traffic is 150 ships in each direction. So there would be, even if the straits opened immediately as a consequence of any ceasefire, a delay in getting all the ships out. And what we need is to work with governments, particularly the littoral states and the US in that region, to ensure that this can be done safely.
What's your assessment of Iran being aware of this new power, this new lever they can pull for decades to come, and how likely it is or easy it is for them to deploy it again, to just say, no more ships until you agree to this?
I think what we've seen is an escalation of the power that Iran already knew it had. So we did see ships interdicted by Iran periodically to prove a point about their reach into these waters. They now know that they've got the power to do this. I don't know whether it's in their interest to do it habitually as a matter of course. I think this will remain an outlier. But we are concerned about some of the rhetoric that's coming around ceasefire talks, particularly with respect to tolls. This is an international strait, and we do not want to be setting a precedent where ships have to pay for transit.
And just finally, in terms of alternatives long term, if it were to become habitual, or if we were to fear that it was habitual, with 10 years of planning, are there alternatives? I mean, clearly there aren't for ships, but if it's more pipelines in other directions, are those possible or not?
I mean, you need to realise the amount of cargo that these vessels carry. The line to Yanbu does the equivalent of 2 VLCCs a day. Well, there's over 100 trapped in the Gulf, and there'd be numbers similar to that transiting every day. So really, we need the straits to be open. There aren't alternatives to going through there.
John, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Right, let's have a look, shall we, at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
So there's a lot of rain around for the next few days. Widespread showers, general rain. It is going to turn warmer, though. Expect a very mild, mostly grey start to the day with a bit of rain around. Western parts of Britain will see prolonged heavy rain moving in this morning. Central and eastern areas will see just a little bit of rain in places. And, in fact, there might be a bit of bright spells there too. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see sunshine and showers. Once persistent, early rain clears the east. It will be warmer overall, but blustery.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up next hour, we just want to let you know we'll be talking to former World Cup star Jill Scott, counting down to the Men's World Cup this summer. And she'll be joining us from Texas, from the stadium where England will kick off their first match. Looking forward to that.
We're also looking at the £7 million operation to clean up an illegal waste dump the size of a football pitch. The pictures are astonishing. It's in Oxfordshire.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
Ooh. OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. James Matthews from Sky News. Why was Ghislaine Maxwell invited to your daughter Chelsea Clinton's wedding? Maria, did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal.
Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Did you stay at the apartment of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
Does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? James Matthews from Sky News, Mr. Mandani.
I have to be honest, when you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited. Could you repeat the question one more time?
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented. Been quite some day.
We start with breaking news.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Now, we've talked an awful lot on this programme about NHS maternity services, and we've really tried to kind of amplify the voices and the stories, experiences of women and dads as well who have gone through heartbreak when they're trying to bring a baby into the world. And as part of that, Sky News has spoken to a mum who raised concerns about her own medical history with the hospital looking after her, but says they were repeatedly ignored. Her baby then died at 28 weeks.
Well, Liz and her husband are among families meeting the Health Secretary this afternoon to discuss the details of a promised review into maternity services in Sussex. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, went to meet her.
I remember finding out that we'd reached a point that we'd never reached before. And I phoned my mum and dad and said, it's a miracle. The miracle that we've been praying for has happened.
When Liz finally fell pregnant, she thought her prayers had been answered. She'd already suffered through 6 miscarriages and an ectopic pregnancy. But she wanted to be a mum more than anything.
We had been praying for Hazel to come into our life for so long. So we felt like our prayers had been answered. I mean, we spent a long time not telling people that we were having a baby. We hid it for as long as we could. Because we wanted to be sure. We wanted to get to the 24-week point. We wanted to get to the viability point, because at that point we felt perhaps we could relax. And of course, you know, any concerns, they would look after us.
So we have a memory box where...
Liz says she went to great lengths to make Worthing hospital staff aware of her medical history. But repeatedly, they claimed not to know or did not act when she told them.
I said, you're not listening, because the greatest risk to this pregnancy is if it's not a live birth. And they still failed me.
At 28 weeks, she became severely unwell.
When I arrived at the operating theatre, there was 30 people there. And they appeared was the consultant that had misdiagnosed me, as well as a senior consultant saying, we're going to deliver the baby. You need to agree to a hysterectomy. And I said, save the baby, don't save me. And then she was pronounced stillborn just before 9:20.
Dr. Maggie Davies, chief nurse at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust, tells Sky News the loss of a baby is an unimaginable tragedy for any parent. And we offer our deepest condolences and sincere apologies to Hazel's family. Our priority is always to provide the best care. That means listening carefully, learning and making changes so that families today get the safest care possible. Liz and her husband Anthony are among more than 20 families pushing for a thorough review of maternity services run by University Hospitals Sussex. Last June, the Health Secretary announced an independent investigation into the trust, but the chair and its scope are yet to be agreed. Families want senior midwife Donna Ockenden to lead this investigation. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Brighton.
So we're straight in meeting some of those women later. We'll make sure that this is a story that we won't, turn our gaze away from.
And turning our attention now to the issue of waste crime, something we've also reported a lot on here at Sky News. A clean-up operation has now begun at an illegal waste site near the River Cherwell in Oxfordshire. The 150-metre-long trail of rubbish was declared a critical incident by the Environment Agency last November.
Now, 30 lorry loads of rubbish are being removed every day, just to kind of get that in your head. It's all expected to cost at least £7 million. Our climate reporter, Victoria Seabrook, went along to find out what's going on.
20,000 tonnes of filthy, rotting rubbish. The clean-up has just started. It will take 15 lorries a day until the end of summer and cost the taxpayer £8 million.
It's only when you come to a site like this that you realise quite how disgusting it is. They are huge, they give off the smell of egg, and here they've got one of these machines to try and mask the smell.
There are hundreds of these sites around the country, and the government says it has a national solution, pledging help for landowners to clean up and extra powers and cash for the Environment Agency.
The new funding that you've promised is going to be £15 million a year, but this site alone is going to cost £8 million to clean up, and overall across the country it's costing us £1 billion every year. So this new funding, it's not going to touch the sides, is it?
But we've got to, as the Environment Secretary,
I stick by the principle that the polluter should pay. We've got 4 arrests already been made here. The idea is that we reclaim the costs from the criminals, and that's why we've toughened up the penalties.
But the taxpayer is paying for this, £8 million.
But we will recover as much of the cost of that as we possibly can.
Waste crime is seen as the new drug dealing. It's a cash cow for criminal gangs who charge people to take away their waste and then instead of paying to put it in a landfill, dump it illegally. It's seen as low risk and high reward because so far the penalties have been few and far between. We have the police, we have a regulator, and yet this is a booming criminal industry.
That's why we have already increased the capacity of the Environment Agency when it comes to drones, to see from the air what's going on, to try and stop this kind of criminality in its tracks before it gets to this extent.
Because sites like this keep growing despite residents sounding the alarm, and over their complaints seem to fall through the cracks.
Residents get put on a merry-go-round of reporting to different agencies. It's taxpayers who are on the hook for all of this, and they'll want the criminals to be held to account more fully.
Eventually, these fields should turn green again. The Environment Agency says its new technology will help it get ahead of criminal gangs. But with an average of 10 new sites appearing every week, they have a long way to go. Victoria Seabrook, Sky News.
Oh, it's astonishing to see that, and I'm sure, like lots of people, watching this as well, will have examples of fly tipping in your area too. One interesting email we got in actually to the inbox mornings@sky.uk from Victor, who said partly the issue that's been causing these illegal tips is the fact that the cost of taking waste to licensed sites is prohibitively high. It can be, £100, £200 to try and get rid of waste in legitimate means, which I think is, quite a good point, actually. Yeah, it's another massive problem and an expensive one, as the government was saying there in that package to Victoria. Now, Sudan is entering the 4th year of a war that's created one of the world's largest crises, with evidence of atrocities, including widespread sexual violence. So a power struggle between 2 generals sparked the conflict. It's now grown into this battle between the army and paramilitary forces. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, spoke with the Foreign Secretary, who described Sudan as the greatest humanitarian crisis this century.
Well, we want to bring the focus of the world onto what is happening in Sudan. It is the greatest humanitarian crisis of the 21st century, and we desperately need a ceasefire. We desperately need support for those who are facing the most unimaginable atrocities and the most unimaginable experiences as a result of the conflict, still 3 years on.
You've described the war in Sudan as the worst humanitarian crisis in the 21st century. The UN has described Gaza as the worst humanitarian crisis. Is there a reason that you've said that?
So I think if you look at the number of people who have been killed, the scale of the sexual violence being used, and the number of people facing famine, you currently have, I think, millions of people in Sudan who continue to be at risk of famine, equivalent really to the scale of the population in London. And so that scale of the famine, that scale of the number of people being killed, I think does need more focus. But look, I'm also deeply concerned about what is continuing to happen in Gaza. And we have called that the ceasefire steps that took place in the autumn was really important, but we need to see much more progress. And there's a risk at the moment that we've seen humanitarian aid actually being reduced to Gaza.
And more to come from Yusra, will be joining us later on in the programme. Of course, she's been leading the coverage, not just for Sky News, frankly, for the world on that particular crisis. Yes, absolutely right. We just want to bring you a report out today that found higher income households were the biggest beneficiaries of government help to buy schemes, and I guess the whole point of those schemes was to try and make home ownership more achievable to everyone, not just the rich. Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies looked at the policy introduced in 2013, finding it only made a limited difference to housing affordability, and didn't make that much difference either to who it helped in terms of if you break down people based on wealth. Yeah, so just to explain what Help to Buy is, it basically helps you get a mortgage with just a 5% deposit. For example, government bring in a kind of 20% back loan to
try and boost the number of first-time buyers coming through. The one thing I would say is that I feel like the biggest barrier to getting on the housing ladder isn't necessarily how much you earn yourself, but how much support you get from, the bank and mum and dad, right? So you may have a slightly higher income, but still not be able to get on the housing ladder, as opposed to someone with a lower income who might have more inherited wealth or more support from family as well. So I'm just really interested to look at the figures of this.
Yeah, so I think this is pointing to the fact that it still probably did help. Obviously, you had to be a first-time buyer. A lot of first-time buyers, they may well have had quite high incomes, but if not for the help, they also wouldn't have got onto the housing ladder. My conclusion always with these things is it's another sign we have to build a lot more houses.
Yeah.
Which is, the simple solution. It's not the simple solution, but the best solution is more supply.
Yeah. One little story to bring you at the end of the hour as well. So this is moral taste buds. Researchers from universities in Sweden and the US say that each nation has its own moral taste bud, which means they find different behaviours more or less frustrating. So in the UK, jumping a queue is right up there.
Jumping queues up there. Interestingly, 88% of people in the UK think it's never justifiable to dodge taxes. 80% of Americans. Only 52% in the Philippines.
I can't actually believe that. I can't believe that. We had quite an amusing discussion on the podcast Cheat Sheet about this as well, when we were kind of ranking how annoying or not we found certain behaviour. What was public displays of affection was up there for you, Wilf, right?
Yeah, well, I had to grade this.
Yeah.
Different types of public, holding hands, cute walking down the street, that's absolutely fine. Aggressive tonguing in the afternoon.
I can't believe you said it.
Not acceptable. Not acceptable. It does happen.
It does.
You sit and you're like, blimey, what on earth is going on over there?
Oh, if you give us your views on...
You dared me to use that phrase live on TV. I went there.
You did. He went there. Let us know
Told
your
you
own.
I would.
Queue jumping, snogging, what's your number one red line at mornings@sky.uk.
We'll be right back.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Rich and Frost.
Sophie and Wilfred, good morning from me as well. We've got a busy show ahead.
President Trump talks to Sky News, telling us the special relationship is in a sad state and that Keir Starmer has made some tragic mistakes.
Well, it's all ahead of the King's visit to the US. The palace have revealed new details of what to expect, and the president told us he is looking forward to the whole thing.
Diplomatic talks intensified in attempts to bring an end to the war, but no reprieve in Israel's bombardment of Lebanon, where children are paying the biggest price.
The countdown to the World Cup kicks off, so we're going to be talking to the Lioness legend, Jill Scott.
And will new funding be enough to tackle this mess? We dig into the costs of clearing up illegal waste dumps.
Good morning. President Trump has launched a scathing attack on the UK in an interview with Sky News. He described the state of the special relationship as sad because, in his words, when we asked them for help, they were not there. He then went on to saying that he'd given the UK a good trade deal, better than I had to, but it can always be changed.
The president didn't hold back on his assessment of the UK's future. He said Keir Starmer had made a tragic mistake not drilling for new oil and gas in the North Sea, and described his immigration policies as insane. He concluded, "You can't succeed, not possible," referring to some of those policies. President Trump was talking to Mark Stone in just the last few hours, and it was quite the phone call. Let's bring Mark in to break down some of the key takeaways for us. And Mark, I mean, clearly the special relationship, if that's still the apt word to use to describe it, was front and centre on this call.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I suppose the first thing to point out is that we can't broadcast the conversation. It was a phone conversation, lasted about 5 minutes. And the way these things work, and I sort of nailed it down with him at the beginning of the call, is that he's happy for us to quote him, but not to broadcast the call. And actually, I think that's quite an interesting... It creates quite you get a different sense of the president. He's not the sort of performative, combative person that we see day in, day out. He's a bit different in these private, well, not private, but these conversations where the cameras aren't rolling. And it tallies what so many people say, is that he's a little bit different privately than he is publicly. I'm one of a number of journalists, a growing number, in fact, who have got at least one of his mobile numbers. And it is his mobile number that we're calling. It's not as if we go through to a switchboard and they get put through to the president and it's all organised. It's on spec. You try his number, get lucky, he answers. You don't get lucky, he doesn't answer. So I called him at 6:30 last night, and he answered just after 2 rings. And I said, look, we spoke last week. Have you got time to speak again? He said, make it quick. I then made it clear that I was recording the conversation. He said, well, hang on, you can record it, but you can't broadcast it. Do you give me your word on that? I said, yes. And off we went. We were away. And the other strange thing is you don't want to go in really hard with a kind of gotcha question or why did you compare yourself to Jesus? Why were you going, why did you have all that to say about the Pope? Or what about Iran and Lebanon? You need to kind of start soft because he might just hang up on you. So we began with the King. I thought that was kind of important. I'll get on to what he said about the King at the moment. It was effusive. But on Starmer, on the special relationship, some really, really hard news lines, I think. He said, well, it's been better, the special relationship, but it's sad. And we gave them a good trade deal, better than I had to, which can always be changed. I thought that was a threat, a clear threat. He is upset. He's irritated by British policy, whether or not it's got anything to do with him. He is. He thinks Britain's going in the wrong direction. He thinks that Britain's immigration policy is insane. He thinks Britain's energy policy is insane. And he told me as much. I went on to talk in more detail with him about the relationship between the two countries. I love your country, he said, and I would love to see it succeed. But if you have bad immigration policies and bad energy policies, you have the worst of both. You can't succeed. It's not possible. He's talked, of course, in the past a lot about where he thinks Britain is going wrong. We know he's got a fondness for the UK. But I thought the language here was stronger, for sure. He talked about North Sea drilling, energy. He talked about it on social media yesterday, in fact. But again, with me, he said, I like Starmer, but I think he's made a tragic mistake in closing the North Sea oil. You see, your energy prices are the highest in the world. By the way, they're not. Other countries have higher energy prices, but that's what he said. And then he said, I think he's made a tragic mistake on immigration. So on both those key policy issues, the president had something to say. And as the call went on, it was 5 minutes. I pushed him back. I pushed back at him on a few things. I said, look, he talked, for example, about immigration, and he kind of echoed what he said about America's challenges with immigration. He said, your country's being invaded. And I said, by who? And he said, by illegal immigrants from all over the world, including those from prisons, drug dealers, people from mental institutions. Your country is being invaded. And I said to him, I said, are you not peddling fake news there? Because that's just not accurate. I mean, yes, Britain has massive challenges with immigration, but is Britain being invaded by people from mental institutions? And he said, I have been very accurate here. He seemed to be suggesting that because he has identified, as he sees it, the challenges of immigration in America, it is the same in the UK. So really, really strong language, scathing, as you say, about Keir Starmer and about the British government. But for the King, well, he loves him.
Yeah, what did he say about the King then, Mark?
So we began with that, and he said, because the call came an hour after Buckingham Palace had announced the details of the state visit, which is taking place in two weeks. Very controversial for some. Why is the King coming? People have asked. Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, says he shouldn't be coming. So the president said he's a great gentleman, a friend of mine, a fantastic person. He had very effusive language about the late Queen as well. We discussed her when we were talking about the special relationship. She and Winston Churchill were the two who kind of coined that. So we had a bit of a discussion about that. But I said to him, which bit of the trip are you looking forward to? Because it's a 4-day trip. The King and Queen are in Washington for all the pomp here, the White House, state dinner, joint address to Congress. Then they go to New York, 9/11 Memorial. Then they go to Shenandoah and Virginia for a bit of countryside. So there's a lot of America that they're going to get involved in. I said, which bit are you looking forward to the most? And in a way that only Donald Trump could say, he said, all of it. I'm looking forward to all of it. But he clearly distinguishes the royals and the royal family from the politics, and he feels perfectly comfortable. And I asked him if it was awkward that he's criticising the government when the King is coming. He doesn't see any sort of conflict there. He thinks it's fine to criticise the government while the King is coming. And actually, the other thing he said, which I thought was interesting, was that he didn't seem to realise that the King is only coming at the request of the government. The King is coming to do the soft power, to kind of smooth over this complicated relationship as it is of late. But he didn't recognise that. He sees them as two separate things.
Mark, what's the latest on Iran, both from your phone call, but other news coming out of DC over the last 12 or 24 hours that talks are restarting?
Yeah, they could be. JD Vance has been talking overnight and has suggested that talks could start again either later this week, maybe next week. We don't know quite at what level or how successful they would be. Look, I would love to have talked to the president more about Iran. It's clearly a more prickly issue to get into. Lebanon as well. I mean, you've been playing Alex Crawford's report from there. Horrific stuff going on there. But I was in the State Department yesterday and the diplomats are talking. The Lebanese and the Israelis, they are talking to each other. That's positive. I'd like to have got into all of that with the president, but he had to go. Literally, he said, I have to go now, Mark. So I said, one more quick question on Iran. I said, do you think we can have a deal by the time the King comes on Iran? He said, it's possible, very possible. They're beaten up pretty bad. It's very possible. And with that, he was gone.
Mark, absolutely fascinating stuff as well. And just to, like you say, just to pick up the phone to him, just unbelievable, really. We learned an awful lot from that chat between the President and Mark Stone. It does feel like the talks may be moving a little bit when it comes to the US and Iran. But as Mark was saying, Lebanon and Israel have held their first direct talks in more than 3 decades.
Although the discussions which took place in Washington were described as productive, no concrete agreements were made. The Lebanese ambassador asked for help to alleviate the country's worsening humanitarian crisis after weeks of deadly strikes.
The latest figures from the Health Ministry say more than 2,120 people have been killed since fighting started up again at the start of March, and that includes 168 children.
Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has visited a hospital treating severely wounded children caught up in the conflict.
She moves her fingers as she recognises her nurse's voice. But with nearly half her body burned in an Israeli airstrike, any movement at all is painful. Her name is Zainab. She's only 12, and her entire family was killed in the same attack she barely survived. She still doesn't know that her parents and 2 young siblings have all been killed. Her brother was 5. Her baby sister wasn't quite 2 years old. Zainab constantly asks for her mother. Her only 2 visitors are her aunt and uncle, and they can't bring themselves to tell her the brutal truth right now.
All civilian. They come why? No one knows. They're not fighting. He doesn't have any bomb. He doesn't make any bad thing for anyone. If I was in our house, she's alone. She's alone. We are the only family. This is very bad issue. Yeah. I don't know what to say. It's very bad. Just chill. What she's fighting, she have rockets or bomb, or 2 years, or they are inside the house. They are not fighting inside. They want to do something, go fight inside. Don't make this civilian attack. Don't attack the civilian. We are civilians.
The sole survivor in just one family affected is still critically ill and not out of danger yet.
More of Alex's reporting is on the Sky News website. Well worth checking it out for that. Lots of course, important angles coming from the war, but few more important than that. As for some of the other shockwaves, though, of course, many of them are economic, and the IMF, a group of leading economists working there, have slashed forecasts for growth in the UK by 0.5%, from 1.3 to 0.8% more than they have done for any other G7 nation.
Well, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is in Washington. She's going to be meeting her opposite number, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Our political correspondent Lucy McDade is here with us. So we're an outlier then, I guess.
Yeah, and look, this is a Chancellor that's going into this meeting having been dealt a number of financial hammer blows just this week alone. This warning coming at a time where she's facing calls to increase defence spending, cut the welfare bill as a result of that call for defence spending, and also knowing that the impact of this is going to be felt for a very long time. And she's going to be meeting somebody who's initiating this action in the Middle East, and we're not seeing it come to an end.
There's obviously already lots of pressures on the finances without just the boost in energy costs and the boost in borrowing costs, no more so in the very short term than on defence.
Yeah, absolutely. So the government has already put some more money into defence. It cut international aid in order to do so. But we have this week had even more stark warnings that we are simply not prepared for war. That's according to the former NATO Secretary-General. The government this morning coming out, though, quite strongly saying they disagree with those claims. Let's just listen to James Murray, Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Look, I've got a great deal of respect for Lord Robertson. But on this, we just disagree. And if I would point him to the decision, I would point your viewers to the decision that we took as a government, that the Chancellor took, along with the Prime Minister, to have the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War.
I mean, he tried to take him on, I guess, because the government feel that they need to try and explain what they're doing when it comes to defence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, he was coming on this morning to talk about partly this investment in Ukraine. The government has been very conscious that it doesn't want this war in Iran to detract from the other war in Ukraine and its efforts to try and support them. It wants to show Volodymyr Zelensky that they are still putting an effort to support them there. But the calls to increase defence spending are coming more and more. They're getting louder and louder. Let's just kind of take a step back and look at the domestic politics of this, because in order to put the money into defence that is being clearly required, some really difficult political decisions are going to have to be made. And the government has tried to make them already and kind of failed. So in cutting international aid, there was disquiet in the Labour Party over that. But in cutting welfare, remember that rebellion that it saw. So for the government to be able to put more money into defence, which it's becoming increasingly difficult for it not to, the political fallout here is going to be really challenging. And that's something that the Chancellor is going to have to come home to after Washington.
Yeah, not going to get easier. Lucy, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
Lucy
you.
McDade speaking to us there.
Well, we'll be speaking to the Conservatives up in about 5 minutes' time or so. Kevin Hollinrake will be joining to discuss.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story? I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Now, we've done an awful lot on maternity healthcare, and women's health in general is something that the Health Secretary is now promising to tackle. He's calling it medical misogyny within the NHS.
Well, West Streeting set out a range of pledges to stop women being ignored, gaslit and humiliated when seeking answers for health conditions. Let's bring in Phoebe, who's got more details on this and what's on the agenda for the Health Secretary today.
Yes, as you said, incredibly strong language from Wes Streeting. He thinks that women need to be heard more clearly when they are raising complaints about their health. And as you said, misogynistic practices. He mentions women being gaslit, their concerns neglected. Endometriosis in particular is something that comes up quite a lot in the strategy. It affects 1 in 10 women, but nevertheless it takes almost a decade on average for women to get diagnosed, and it's an incredibly debilitating condition. And so in terms of how Labour want to tackle this, reproductive health really is at the heart of it. So conditions associated with menstruation, periods, pregnancy, menopause, all that kind of thing. Improving pain relief for, the more everyday things like having contraceptive coils fitted, supporting parents who lose their babies, supporting women who need abortions. But perhaps the most interesting part of the strategy is the promise to trial a system where if women are not happy with the care they receive, then the funding for that particular medical provider will be withheld until such time that improvements have been made.
And I guess a lot of it is just talking about some of the stuff more openly as well, right?
Yeah, exactly that. Raising awareness, being aware of what is and isn't normal and not feeling like you have to hold back and keep it to yourself.
Phoebe, thanks very much. Well, let's get the view now, shall we, of the Conservative Party. They have been really trying to do quite a lot of work on mobile phones, on social media, and coming on the programme to discuss that is the chairman of the Conservative Party, Kevin Hollinrake, who is here this morning. So phones in schools is your focus today, that's right?
Sure. I mean, we'd like to see a complete ban on social media for children under the age of 16. We have an amendment today we tabled in the House, which we'll be voting on, and we hope the government will support it. We don't think it will, but what we can do for now, and that would require us to do that when we get back into power, but what we can do now, the local elections coming up May the 7th, we're asking all our Conservative councillors and councils to convene a conversation between them and our local schools to completely ban smartphones in schools. We think that's the right thing to do. Our young people need a break from social media. There's too much damaging content on there, so that's what we're committing to do today.
I feel like the lights have suddenly changed on me. I don't know if it's if I'm in shadow or not, but the director is very cleverly taking me out of vision for a while, so we've got more of Kevin Hollinrake on our screens as a result.
Careful.
So, from the darkness, I'm going to say, is it a little bit, I guess, mischievous, the Conservatives, just keep putting down all this legislation on banning phones for under 16s? We know the government's consulting on it, right? They said that they're looking at the evidence to try and work out the best strategy.
Well, they're only consulting because we put down these motions in the first place.
Don't you need to wait for the consultation to end now, then?
Well, we made a decision. We made a decision we should ban it. Kemi Badenoch was very clear we should ban it. Now, if Keir Starmer wants to do a consultation, kick things into the long grass, as he does time and time again, he's no backbone, he can't make decisions, so he goes he plays by the rule book all the time. Kemi Badenoch made a decision we should ban this. It was a bold decision, and many people asked questions about it when we announced it, but I think most people now are recognising, cross-party, indeed, many Labour MPs think it's the right thing to do as well.
Are you speaking to some Labour MPs who are saying that, then?
Of course, we'll speak to any party. We're very happy to work cross-party to do the right thing for this country, be it on social media bans, smartphones, or indeed our defence, which is a crucial issue, and the cost of living crisis, all those things. We are very happy to work cross-party.
On the social media ban, because, look, you know, for me, this is a big schoolgate issue, and I know that a lot of parents are very, very concerned about it and want to, I guess, a stronger response from the government. There was a report looking into what happened in Australia that was out earlier this week that found that 60% of under-16s are still on social media. I mean, is there an argument that we should wait and see what happened in Australia, learn the lessons from them, so that we can get the right policy?
We should always try and learn lessons, but we already have a ban on social media for under 13s. This is increasing the age threshold. And listen, the government can't do everything, but it can do the right things and it can support parents. I think as a parent myself of 4 children, it's easier for me if the rule was no accessing social media under 16, that you can help to enforce that at home. So parents have the primary part to play here, of course, and schools, of course, and government, probably in that sequence.
Can I ask you your reaction to an interview that our correspondent Mark Stone did today with President Trump? He had the phone call with him, 5-minute phone call. And as usual, I guess, Donald Trump was pretty critical of some of the UK's policy. On immigration, he said that the policies are currently insane. He said that there is an invasion happening. Do you think there is an invasion happening?
But the immigration is too high. There's no question about that. And there's two types of immigration, both legal and illegal immigration. We legislated in the last Parliament to implement something that was very controversial at the time, and I think many people like yourself asked questions on it, detaining and deporting people, including back to their home country or the third country. That would have proven effective. Labour scrapped it when they took office.
Well, just to say that the questions that we were asking about the Rwanda scheme, which I think is what you were referring to, was because no one actually went on a plane. It didn't work. No one left.
No, it did work because it was already deterring people from coming to the UK.
How many people went to Rwanda? I must have missed them.
No, they went to Ireland instead because they knew they couldn't claim asylum through that route, coming over the Channel, coming to the UK.
That wasn't the policy to deport them to Ireland. Come on, you can't say that the Rwanda scheme was a glorious success when not a single
person. It would have been a success. It would have been a success if Keir Starmer and his cabinet and his backbenchers had the backbone to implement it. Because there's no doubt about it. People want to come to the UK to be in the UK, not to be deported back to their home country or back to Rwanda. Most people acknowledge the only way to deal with illegal immigration is through a deterrent strategy, and that's exactly what it was.
The question is, do you think there's an invasion?
I think immigration is too high. I wouldn't use those words. Immigration is too high. That's the reality. We made our mistakes in office in terms of that. We kept promising to control it, and we got the rules wrong. When we had the controls, was in that cut migration, so there's too many people coming into the country. We want to make sure we can control migration and make sure people come to this country, contribute. That's fundamental. That's what we've got a borders plan to make sure we come out of the European Convention on Human Rights to tackle illegal immigration, reinstitute a third country deportation policy, but also to control migration, get Parliament to set a number on net migration that must be adhered to.
I mean, it is going down, it's fair to say, net migration.
It's going down significantly,
right?
absolutely,
Yeah, so
and quite right too, because of the changes we make. Because of the changes we made in office.
Thank you very much indeed, Kevin Hollenrich, speaking
My
to
pleasure,
us
thank you.
there. Coming up, we're going to be talking about World Cup fever. Less than 60 days to go until the World Cup. We're going to be talking to one person who knows very much about it, former Lioness Jill Scott.
Sudan is now entering the fourth year of a war that's created one of the world's largest crises, with evidence of atrocities including widespread sexual violence.
So a power struggle between two generals sparked the conflict. It's now grown into a battle between the army and paramilitary forces. Our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bagir has been really leading the coverage on this for Sky News, but frankly the media in general as well, as she spoke to the Foreign Secretary.
I'm standing in the courtyard of the Foreign Office after sitting down with Yvette Cooper, the UK's Foreign Secretary. We spoke about Sudan, the largest war on civilians in the world that receives little to no attention globally.
Well, we want to bring the focus of the world onto what is happening in Sudan. It is the greatest humanitarian crisis of the 21st century, and we desperately need a ceasefire. We desperately need support for those who are facing the most unimaginable atrocities and the most unimaginable experiences as a result of the conflict, still 3 years on.
You've described the war in Sudan as the worst humanitarian crisis in the 21st century. The UN has described Gaza as the worst humanitarian crisis. Is there a reason that you've said that?
So I think if you look at the number of people who have been killed, the scale of the sexual violence being used, and the number of people facing famine, you currently have, I think, millions of people in Sudan who continue to be at risk of famine, equivalent really to the scale of the population in London. And so that scale of the famine, that scale of the number of people being killed, I think does need more focus. But look, I'm also deeply concerned about what is continuing to happen in Gaza. And we have called that the ceasefire steps that took place in the autumn was really important, but we need to see much more progress. And there's a risk at the moment that we've seen humanitarian aid actually being reduced to Gaza.
3 years of war has seen Sudan torn apart, with large swathes of territory now held by the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, who are battling the military for control of the country. The areas in yellow are controlled by the RSF, and the areas in green have been reclaimed or maintained by the Sudanese armed forces, including the capital, Khartoum. More than 12 million people have been displaced by this war, with many of them fleeing combat zones more than once.
Look, there's an immediate humanitarian issue, and that's why the UK will be announcing this week over £140 million this year for humanitarian support.
The UK is accused of covering up for the UAE, kind of shielding them from criticism and accountability in terms of backing the RSF in this war. What do you make of that?
We've been very clear, first of all, that there should be no arms flows. We have supported the no arms flows to anywhere in Sudan. Secondly, the UN arms embargo for Darfur, and also being clear that all countries need to take responsibility for this. We have raised these issues not just with UAE, but with Saudi and Egypt and the US, which is the 4 members of the Quad, because those countries are pulling together, have made statements which are all about ensuring that there is supposedly action against the external support that is coming to Sudan and to the warring parties. But what we need to see is that work taken forward in practice, including around the ceasefire.
Well, Yusra's here with us on this 3rd anniversary of the war. Yusra, I mean, we've been talking about it being this forgotten war. For the scale of what's going on, it doesn't get the kind of attention it needs. What are we doing in terms of actual help or aid, and other major economies? What is Sudan receiving?
Well, the UK has announced this aid package for Sudan, £146 million. That is a decrease from last year's humanitarian funding. But what they're very pleased about is the fact that they're doubling funding for local aid groups, for emergency responders on the ground, from 6 million to 15 million. We've met those groups. We've worked with them. We've spoken to them. They are incredibly under-resourced. So that money will be put to good use. They're the ones on the front line, and they're also dealing with displacement and violence themselves. So that is a good development. We've also seen this Berlin conference, which is happening as we speak, which brings the UK, EU, the US are organising it, but brings civil society to the forefront. They're engaging them in terms of humanitarian funding. But the warring parties aren't included. They're not invited. And that kind of brings the question about peace talks, mediations, 3 years without a single ceasefire, and the warring parties still won't come to the table to discuss a political solution.
Yeah, it's so depressing. I'll be honest, just looking at some of the numbers today, this morning, I find it quite hard to hold on my head how big this is. 12 million people forced to flee their homes. 25. You've covered this for a long time. What's been most shocking for you?
I think one of the things about the statistics is that you don't get the severity or the intensity, right? You get the scale, and these are unfathomable numbers. But of the people we've met, the displaced people, many of them more than once, they go to one place, the armed violence reaches them there, and they go to the next place. And that sense of relentlessness that they can't even take root, even in a camp, and these camps are also targeted. The first 3 months of the year, 700 people at least have been killed by drone strikes. And drone strikes aren't just targeting military targets from both sides. They're targeting displacement shelters, schools, hospitals, universities, places where people are finding shelter. It's honestly unbelievable. And I think that these stats are just the beginning. It's when you go on the ground and you meet people and you hear their stories that you realise that this is just hugely, hugely grave.
It's interesting because you don't really think of drones in Sudan, right? You know, the development in modern warfare and how devastatingly that could be used in places where there's like a civil war as well.
What stage are we at with the war? I mean, who's winning?
It's honestly, it's a 2 for 2 because the army reclaimed the capital Khartoum last year, but the RSF then pivoted their resources to the capital of North Darfur al-Fashir, which ended in a city-wide massacre, as we saw horrifically end of last year. So it's now looking like it could be a split, and that's a big fear for people. Sudan's already been split. It was the largest country in Africa. The south seceded, and now there's a potential of more fragmentation. But the issue is that weapons are really advanced. We've done some investigations that show some weapons are being battle tested in Sudan. So you're seeing fragmentation and just an onslaught of warfare, modern warfare, that means that people can't escape.
When you say weapons being battle tested in Sudan, what do you mean?
We've seen weapons that have been, or military hardware that's been announced in these kind of shows, these conventions, be withdrawn, modified, and then end up in the battlefield.
What, by like companies or by
companies, yeah. I mean, we've looked at some APVs, some armoured vehicles that have been modified and are kind of out being used in Sudan in a modified version that haven't been shown before, haven't even been advertised before. And that's really shocking when you think that just the scale and the fact that this is some of the best, most advanced hardware in the world being used on civilians, not just on opponents, not just on other military opponents.
To test it, to kind of see if it works or not?
I mean,
or we don't know, but like...
We don't know the intention, but the fact that these modified versions are being used on the ground means that they're going to be looking at the impact and assessing if they should be sold.
Wow. As always, thanks so much for your amazing work on this and more of Yusra's reporting, of course, on the Sky News website.
Yeah, we'll continue, of course, the focus on the reporting on Sudan continues to matter so much.
Now, switching focus, thankfully, to a very positive story. We are 57 days. God, it's close. Only 57 days until the World Cup kicks off in US, Canada and Mexico.
Oh, we can go live now to Texas. We can speak to the former Lioness, Jill Scott. Jill, you're at the very stadium that England are going to be playing in, is that right?
So I'm actually at the Dallas Cowboys indoor facility where they train, and I was actually doing some dancing with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders here yesterday, but fantastic facilities everywhere in Frisco.
Well, and so we're kicking our first game is in Dallas.
Yeah, so it's the 17th of June at the Dallas Stadium against Croatia, so expecting a lot of fans to be here. They might not have tickets for all the games. There's going to be 9 games in Dallas, there's going to be 7 in Houston. But one thing I can guarantee, there's going to be fan zones, watch-along parties, and it's going to be such a great atmosphere.
And what are the... I mean, we're obviously 57 days away still, but what are the expected temperatures and how do you think that's going to weigh on our players? Because some of those... I remember Japan, South Korea, we kind of choked on the heat.
It's going to be
Brazil.
a big deal.
Is it going to be a problem for our players?
I don't think it'll be a problem. I was very lucky that I got to play in 4 World Cups and experienced some heat as well playing for England. But it's not like you turn up and just go, oh, it's hot today. I think England will be very, very well prepared. I remember us wearing extra layers in training, making sure we had electrolytes in our drinks. And there's so many different things now, especially with sports scientists, that will have the guys very well prepared. It hasn't been too hot at the minute, but we know that it's going to get a lot hotter. But as soon as they put that shirt on, they go out there, represent England at the World Cup, I think they'll forget about the heat.
Now, Wilf's very optimistic, shall I say, about England's chances in the World Cup. I'm more of a natural pessimist with these things. But, Jill, you're a winner. You've actually won stuff. So what's your advice for the boys?
Yes, they're going to do it. We need to get behind them as a team. I think they've got such good strength and depth in the squad. I know the last couple of internationals, there was a few players that had to go home because of injuries, but there's so many fantastic players that England have. So I'm so excited. I'm really excited. And I've been having the full Texas experience here. I went to my first rodeo. I've been practicing line dancing. And also for the fans, I have to tell them the barbecue food is amazing.
It's a fun place, there's no doubt about tension. Politically, we've been talking about this earlier today. Our reporter Mark Stone had an interview with President Trump. Do you get a feeling of that, or is sport something that unites, and it's kind of quite the opposite?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to talk about politics, but yeah, I think my experience here, everybody's talking about the up-and-coming World Cup. I have to say soccer, not football. And you can just really start to get a feel. All the people in Texas have been so friendly. There's merchandise everywhere. There's posters starting to go up. So I think the fans will have a great time. I really, really do.
Jill, it's not soccer though, is it? Come on.
No, it's football, but I won't say that too loud.
Can I ask about the difference between US and UK fans? I'm always intrigued in this because I feel like American football fans, you know, similar to the Brits, or are there a few differences?
Yeah, I think the thing that the fans share is passion for the teams and for the sport. And I think one thing we can say about America is when they do sporting events, they do it very, very well. I've been to basketball games, ice hockey games, and it's always just a great time to go and watch the sport, but there's also other things going on as well, which just makes it a great day. So we know America do sport very, very well, and I think this World Cup will be no different.
Do we know if is there going to be a half-time show? Is there going to be a sort of Super Bowl-esque half-time show?
I'm not sure, actually, but after my performance with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, I might get myself a little call-up, maybe.
All right, well, we must make sure this happens. I think it's a great. Are you going to be back out there for the World Cup, Jill, or back here?
Yeah, Yes, I'm definitely going to be heading out. I'm not sure exactly which games yet, but I'll definitely be here supporting the guys at some point.
Lovely stuff, Jill. Great to talk to you, as always. I love in the hat as well. Absolutely brilliant. Lovely stuff. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've obviously spent a bit of time in the States. How into soccer, football are they?
Massively increased over the last couple of decades. Still low.
That's interesting.
But I think they'll get huge, as Jill was saying, they'll get hugely behind their tournament that they're hosting. The big other thing I'd say is I think they love the Premier League, they'll love the World Cup, because in contrast, sorry to say this, it's so much better than the MLS. The MLS is
not good.
Not good.
I think it's the word you're looking for. I'm going to jump in and save you there.
It's the pace of it. It's so slow. I'd much rather watch, League Two here. It's much quicker pace. I don't know quite how they manage it, but it's very, very slow pace. It's not very dynamic, and that's why they love the Premier League so much, because it's just
it's incredible, isn't it? Best in the world. Let's take a look, shall we, at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
The next few days will bring widespread showers or more general rain, but it will turn warmer. Expect a very mild and mostly grey start with some rain around. Western parts of Britain will see prolonged heavy rain moving in this morning, while central and eastern areas will see just a little rain in places. In fact, some bright spells will develop there. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see sunshine and showers. Once persistent early rain clears, that is, it'll be warmer overall, but blustery. The afternoon will see heavy rain becoming increasingly showery as it clears across Britain. Sunshine and more scattered showers will follow from the west, some heavy, with the risk of hail and thunder. That's your weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Now, judging by our email inbox, this is something that has got, understandably, a lot of people riled up. The £8 million operation to clean up an illegal waste dump the size of a football pitch in Oxfordshire.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week.
There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over. Full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that. She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor. I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. James Matthews from Sky News. Why was Ghislaine Maxwell invited to your daughter Chelsea Clinton's wedding? Maria, did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal.
Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Did you stay at the apartment of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
Mr. Hexet, does your past behaviour make you unfit to serve? Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? James Matthews from Sky News, Mr. Mandani.
I have to be honest, when you said you were from Sky News, I just got very excited. Could you repeat the question one more time?
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today. They are pushing forward.
They dash to the water.
Wait, what country are you
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented. Been quite some day.
We start with breaking news.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Well, we talked a lot about NHS maternity services on the programme, trying to amplify the voices of women who've had difficult experiences, and the men as well, it should be said too. We've spoken today to a mother who raised repeated concerns about her medical history with a hospital that she says were ignored, and her baby then died at 28 weeks old.
Well, Liz and her husband are among families meeting the Health Secretary this afternoon to discuss the details of a promised review into maternity services in Sussex. Our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, went to meet her.
I remember finding out that we'd reached a point that we'd never reached before. And I phoned my mum and dad and said, it's a miracle. The miracle that we've been praying for has happened.
When Liz finally fell pregnant, she thought her prayers had been answered. She'd already suffered through 6 miscarriages and an ectopic pregnancy. But she wanted to be a mum more than anything.
We had been praying for Hazel to come into our life for so long. So we felt like our prayers had been answered. I mean, we spent a long time not telling people that we were having a baby. We hid it for as long as we could.
Why?
Because we wanted to be sure. We wanted to get to the 24-week point. We wanted to get to the viability point, because at that point we felt perhaps we could relax, and of course, you know, any concerns, they would look after us. So we have a memory box where...
Liz says she went to great lengths to make Worthing hospital staff aware of, or did not act when she told them.
I said, you're not listening, because the greatest risk to this pregnancy is if it's not a live birth. And they still failed me.
At 28 weeks, she became severely unwell.
When I arrived at the operating theatre, there was 30 people there, and they appeared was the consultant that had misdiagnosed me, as well as a senior consultant saying, we're going to deliver the baby. You need to agree to a hysterectomy. And I said, save the baby, don't save me. And then she was pronounced stillborn just before 9:20.
Dr Maggie Davies, chief nurse at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust, tells Sky News the loss of a baby is an unimaginable tragedy for any parent, and we offer our deepest condolences and sincere apologies to Hazel's family. Our priority is always to provide the best care. That means listening carefully, learning and making changes so that families today get the safest care possible. Liz and her husband, Anthony, are among more than 20 families pushing for a thorough review of maternity services run by University Hospitals Sussex. Last June, the Health Secretary announced an independent investigation into the trust, but the chair and its scope are yet to be agreed. Families want senior midwife Donna Ockenden to lead this investigation. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Brighton.
Incredibly moving and important reporting there, and thanks as always to the families and the people who've been through the worst possible thing, trying to use their voice to make change.
It's a story that we've been covering a lot on Sky News and will continue to do so. And another one is the issue of waste crime, something that has been getting much more attention of late. And there's a big clean-up operation that's begun at an illegal waste site near the River Cherwell in Oxfordshire. A 150-metre-long trail of rubbish was declared a critical incident by the Environmental Agency last November.
Now, just to give you a scale of how big this dump site is, 15 lorry loads of rubbish are being taken away every day. It's all expected to cost the taxpayer £8 million. Reporter Victoria Seabrick visited the site and sent this update.
20,000 tonnes of filthy, rotting rubbish. The clean-up has just started. It will take 15 lorries a day until the end of summer and cost the taxpayer £8 million.
It's only when you come to a site like this that you realise quite how disgusting it is. They are huge, they give off the smell of egg, and here they've got one of these machines to try and mask the smell.
There are hundreds of these sites around the country, and the government says it has a national solution, pledging help for landowners to clean up and extra powers and cash for the Environment Agency.
The new funding that you've promised is going to be £15 million a year, but this site alone is going to cost £8 million to clean up, and overall across the country it's costing us £1 billion every year. So this new funding, it's not going to touch the sides, is it?
But we've got to, as the Environment Secretary, I stick by the principle that the polluter should pay. We've got 4 arrests already been made here. The idea is that we reclaim the costs from the criminals, and that's why we've toughened up the penalties.
But the taxpayer is paying for this, £8 million.
But we will recover as much of the cost of that as we possibly can.
Waste crime is seen as the new drug dealing. It's a cash cow for criminal gangs who charge people to take away their waste and then instead of paying to put it in a landfill, dump it illegally. It's seen as low risk and high reward because so far the penalties have been few and far between. We have the police, we have a regulator, and yet this is a booming criminal industry.
That's why we have already increased the capacity of the Environment Agency when it comes to drones, to see from the air what's going on, to try and stop this kind of criminality in its tracks before it gets to this extent.
Because sites like this keep growing despite residents sounding the alarm, and over their complaints seem to fall through the cracks.
Residents get put on a merry-go-round of reporting to different agencies. It's taxpayers who are on the hook for all of this, and they'll want the criminals to be held to account more fully.
Eventually, these fields should turn green again. The Environment Agency says its new technology will help it get ahead of criminal gangs. But with an average of 10 new sites appearing every week, they have a long way to go. Victoria Seabrook, Sky News.
It's unbelievable when you look at that, isn't it? The size of it.
Unbelievable, unbelievably expensive to sort out, and of course it's not, by any stretch of the imagination, the only site across the UK where this is a problem.
No, it's really not. It's really not. And the other thing that a lot of people are saying in the inbox, I have to say, is that it is difficult and expensive to get rid of waste by other means. You have to book a particular slot at the tip. You've got to pay money for it, and council collections don't always work. And I guess that leads people to not even necessarily knowing they're doing anything wrong by paying a private company to take stuff away from outside their house, a mattress or whatever, and then look where it might end up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big problem. The other thing people have been emailing in about was this story we were talking about last hour about people's pet peeves, pet hates, and we've had a few emails coming in on this.
Yeah, we have. Ignorance of driving and overtaking lanes, parking on pavements, queue jumping, which I agree with, by the way, but this is probably the best one from Ian. People opening their packed lunches on trains with egg, crisps, leftover pizza at 7:30 in the morning.
That's from someone called Ian. I kind of respect that, eating your leftovers.
On a train?
Well, if you're hungry. We're out of time. See you tomorrow.
All the big issues.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?